Now, 7 weather with meteorologist Brent Cameron.
Today goes down as the driest day of the week, Southeast Florida. And did we ever need that? Lots of blue sky there late in the day and early into the evening. Noticing a breeze out of the east, 13 miles per hour. Inland, not as much, under 10 miles per hour. And it's this easterly flow that's going to continue. It means the chance for a few showers during the late night, early morning time frame. But as we saw today, it's also helpful with the stronger wind flow to take the steering winds or to keep the steering with the sea breeze out toward the west. So we watch as storms flare up in the southwestern corridor of the state, as we saw today, and it's been much more tranquil, although we're starting to see a few isolated showers coming in along that breeze now tonight. These are pretty fast movers. We're going to continue to monitor those areas being watched where we've had so much rain, especially in northern parts of Miami-Dade County. Let's talk about your day tomorrow. It's going to seem familiar, a day very much like today, as we watch some morning showers and then some inland storms as the sea breezes flare up, a typical pattern, classic, and then that's the winds will take that activity out toward the west. Here's the national vantage point, and where there's lots of activity, multiple low pressure areas over the eastern third of the nation, and then at the very back edge here we have a front. That's important to note because the same front, it will merge with another and eventually make it all the way into portions of Florida and probably stall out early next week, maybe the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. That's probably our most likely bet to maybe get back in one of those very wet situations. Some of that tropical moisture may tend to stream back in our direction late in the weekend and early next week. So that's going to be something to monitor as we watch that. Meantime, watching one feature in the tropics as we get closer to the official start of hurricane season. This wouldn't bother anybody if it forms, but it's a potential of a subtropical system over the central Atlantic and heading north over the next few days.
And first warning meteorologist Vanessa Vanette joins us now. And Vanessa, we might notice some changes to the storms this season. Explain.
That's right, Aaron. Although NOAA and other organizations predict it's going to be an above average year for storms and they may be getting stronger, they also seem to be slowing down. I spoke to the head National Hurricane Center in Miami about why this might be the case. In 2017, Hurricane Harvey stalled with its center over the Texas coast for 4 days, dropping historic amounts of rain. In 2018, Hurricane Florence caused record-breaking storm surge and high rainfall totals. Last year, Hurricane Dorian was a powerful Category 5 storm that struck the Bahamas. I spoke with Dr. Michael Brennan, a senior hurricane specialist from the National Hurricane Center, and asked if there is a reason these storms are moving slower.
I think it just all has to do with the steering patterns that the storm encounters at the time.
The trend has been noticeable in 3 consecutive years in one significant way.
The most obvious one is rainfall, because the forward motion of the storm is the primary factor that determines how much rain a certain location is going to get.
Plus, slow-moving storms could produce high storm surge.
If it sits in the same location and piles water up against the coast over multiple tide cycles, you can really have a prolonged or very even higher storm surge in situations like that.
All this leads to major flooding.
You're going to have those catastrophic winds that just sit over the same spot for hours and hours and hours.
Persistent hurricane force winds, high storm surge, and intense rainfall leads to catastrophic damage. Given the slowdown, there is a possibility these storms might intensify.
Well, it largely depends on where they stop or slow down.
And it also depends in the ocean characteristics.
If they're stopped over an area where the ocean water is very deep, but the warm water in the ocean is very shallow, only the very few top few feet of the ocean, then the storm sitting over that same area of ocean will mix up the colder water and eventually start to weaken.
All those storms will grow bigger in size.
If a storm were to stop over a region where there's very deep warm water, it could continue to strengthen.
And let's continue to talk about the tropics. We have this disturbance that was the remnants of Amanda from the Pacific Ocean. It's right over Central America. Now a hurricane center is now giving the system a very high chance and may develop into a tropical depression later today or tomorrow. So of course we'll keep you posted. It will be entering the Bay of Campeche around this area for the next couple of days. It will linger around here, and then by the end of this week we could see a tropical storm or hurricane over the Gulf of Mexico in the next couple of days. Of course we'll keep you posted on that.
So typically the Central American gyre is something we need to worry about both at the beginning of the hurricane season and then kind of leaning toward the end of the hurricane season as well. So these storms spin up very quickly close to home and need to be monitored very carefully. So basically a Central American gyre defined as a large cyclonic circulation right over Central America. Pretty common this time of the year, May into June, but also as we get beyond the peak of hurricane season, which is September. And remember, the season goes all the way through November, so it can happen all the way into late in the fall. It can produce exceptional rainfall and flooding, and it can also spawn tropical cyclones, as we recently saw with Amanda, spinning up very quickly, very close to the coastline. So it didn't have a lot of time to really develop and strengthen, but it developed just enough to give us flooding rain and mudslides, unfortunately, to El Salvador and now portions of southern Mexico, still seeing the very heavy rain moving across this region. So just over the last 7 days, you'll notice that we have the pink and even the white on the map. We're talking 1 to 2 feet of rain. And this is over a relatively short period of time. So no wonder we've had all kinds of issues, even loss of life and property in Guatemala and El Salvador. How often do we see these systems cross basins? Well, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, we've seen it happen 5 times since 1842, but more often we see it happening on the other side of things, going from the Atlantic to the Pacific side, since we typically see these storms move from the east to the west. All right, Alex, you've got much more on now. Invest 93L, which was Amanda.
Yeah, you said it. This is going to be the big story here for us over the next several days as it tries to gather itself here. Right now, the National Hurricane Center giving it about an 80% chance of developing into a tropical cyclone over the next 5 days. Generally, somewhere in that hatched red zone is where we think that would take place, again, over the next few days. Right now, as we take a look at the satellite view, no real center of circulation forming here where we have the biggest thunderstorm activity there over the Yucatan, parts of Belize, Guatemala at this point. But we think as this thing begins to kind of drift off towards the west a bit into the Bay of Campeche, we will be seeing that changing here for us. So, yeah, one to watch for sure. In terms of where it's going, well, for now, early week, we got a big area of high pressure, big ridge to the north. It's going to kind of keep it at bay, so drifting across the Bay of Campeche. But then late in the week for the weekend, a bit of a weakness develops, and so that'll give it the opportunity to begin to drift off towards the north. Tropical storm probability high into next week, according to the European model here. High there for you in the Bay of Campeche, so that is the zone that we think that will be developing. And you can see the mid-level spin associated with this thing going to be working its way over across the southern Bay of Campeche for the next several days. Not in and out. We're watching it. Stay with us.
It's June 1st. You know what that means, folks? We are officially in hurricane season.
Yeah, not ready for it, but here we are. We're starting off this first day tracking an area in the Gulf of Mexico. So let's send it over to our chief certified meteorologist, Betty Davis.
Hi, ladies. I guess this would be appropriate since we're just kicking off the hurricane season officially. This area of disturbed weather is near the west coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. So I am shining a spotlight on this vast area of cloud, showers, and thunderstorm activity. It's a rainmaker so far, and rain is going to continue to be likely. Once this area of disturbed weather gets more so out over the Bay of Campeche, conditions are expected to be more conducive for this to get its act together. The National Hurricane Center forecasters are putting the formation potential at 90% over the next 2 days, as this system will be down near portions of the Bay of Campeche. Now, the thing about it is I'll be watching a little bit later on today, in fact tonight, to see if it gets upgraded to a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm, but heavy rainfall is going to be likely for portions of Central America, parts of Mexico. So I'll be back here in a little while to talk more about the hurricane season and what's going on down here near the Yucatan Peninsula. For now, nothing we're going to be too alarmed about, but definitely catching our attention. And by the way, if this gets named, we're going to be on our 3rd named system for the season. We got an early start in May with the formation of Arthur and Bertha. I'm sure a lot of you out there recall those too. I'll be back here in a little while with a lot more on our weather right here at home for the rest of the week, keeping an eye on the Doppler radar. Guys?
And it is a great day here at Channel 7.
It sure is. Our colleague and good friend, Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow, is back in the Weather Center with us. And here on the first day of hurricane season, nonetheless, Les, you're following something out there, Phil.
Yes, indeed. An active start to the 2020 season. I'll have that in just a moment. Right now, a look at the state. There is a line of clouds sitting right here. That is a weak front moving to the south. Could bring us a little bit of rain during the day tomorrow. 86 degrees in Fort Lauderdale, Miami 87. The I-4 corridor is pretty warm at this hour. 90 Orlando, 93 in Tampa. We do have a little bit of moisture making its way in from the Atlantic. Dotted shower activity. We could see 1 or 2 later on tonight in Miami-Dade and Broward as well as the Keys. So we have a brand new tropical depression number 3. We've already had 2 named systems in May. This developed out of a tropical storm in the eastern Pacific by the name of Amanda. It fell apart and now it has reorganized right by the Yucatan Peninsula, 30-mile-per-hour winds. Now, where's it headed? Well, it looks like it's going to hang around here across the Bay of Campeche over the next few days. Could become Tropical Storm Cristobal sometime Tuesday afternoon, and then eventually it'll start to move towards the north, and it could be anywhere here in this area shaded. High pressure to the east, jet stream to the north. It could get trapped here for a few days. Now, for us, we're looking at that tropical depression, the jet stream and a front, and some tropical moisture making its way in the Caribbean Sea. By tomorrow, we could see a few showers here across South Florida, heavy rain across Central America and southern Mexico. Now, by Wednesday, the jet and the front kind of stall out here across the area, trapping tropical moisture. We could see some pockets of heavy rain, and that heavy rain will continue across this region. Flooding, landslides, and mudslides are a real possibility.
And this is where we have to turn to all things tropical, Matt.
We're already dealing now tropical depression number 3. It's not quite in Cancun, but Cancun feeling the effects of that with some clouds and showers coming up from the south to the north right across the Yucatan Peninsula. This has been already a really busy early hurricane season. We had Tropical Storm Arthur. We had Tropical Storm Bertha. Officially, hurricane season starts today, June 1st, and now we might be looking at our 3rd named storm here in the Atlantic Basin this year. If it happens, the name would be Cristobal, and if that happens, it'll be the earliest a 3rd storm has ever formed in the Atlantic Basin. So that hasn't happened quite yet. Still with winds of about 30 miles an hour. There it is, TD number 3. Now, it was once a tropical storm, Amanda, that came out of the eastern Pacific, crossed Central America. It's still really doing that, bringing a lot of rainfall in. We had massive flooding out across Guatemala and El Salvador because of inches and inches of rain, and now it's trying to form another storm, or we think at least it has a chance to do that, out across the Bay of Campeche. So it's close enough to the Yucatan where it continues to pinwheel in a lot of rainfall. So here's Cancun, here's Cozumel, there is the Yucatan Peninsula, and there is the Bay of Campeche. So we're watching this again. Hasn't formed into an official tropical storm yet, but if it does, it will be Cristobal, and again, it will be the earliest that we had a C-named storm ever in the history since we started recording these things over 100 years ago. Obviously, a lot of clouds, ragtag circulation. It's not very well defined yet, but again, we think we're going to have a storm either very late tonight or early tomorrow. So there's a very high probability that that 3rd storm of the season will form.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We're glad you're here. I'm Ashley Glass.
We sure are. I'm Matt Lincoln. We got a couple things on the weather front that we're looking at. Of course, some showers on the radar and also a TD in the Gulf, Chris.
TD right now, it might be a TS pretty soon, as in tropical storm. Doesn't have a name yet. It's still a tropical depression. The top winds are only about 30, 35 miles an hour. But we do have circulation. We have a tropical weather center, and here it is right here. Tropical depression number 3, top winds 35 miles an hour. Just got a brand new track, and you have to watch closely because it's just not going to move too much for about 3 or 4 days. This is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, just sitting in the same place. Finally, by Friday and Saturday, it starts to move a little bit. Saturday and then Sunday, starting to move a little little bit more north. Now, notice this is way over in the western Gulf. We're way over in the eastern Gulf. So right now, any track would take it generally to the west right here. Computer models are keeping it over there. We'll look at that in a minute.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Jackie Jarris. We have meteorologist Chris Warren, who's going to join us live from home in just a minute. But if you haven't heard yet and you're just tuning in, we have a new tropical storm. Tropical depression number 3 has intensified just enough that we now have Tropical Storm Cristobal. It's packing winds around 40 miles per hour. We're looking live at Campeche, Mexico, and you can see the heavy rains that are coming down. If you look down at the street, you can see that everything is very wet there. We've got the very cloudy conditions, and heavy rain and life-threatening flooding will be the major concerns for parts of Mexico into the Yucatan, as well as into parts of Central America that have already been hit very hard from this. There you can see the latest statistics. The pressure at this latest update too has dropped just a little bit, 1 millibar in pressure, so it's not a lot, but we've seen a significant change in the organization of this since earlier this morning. So that convection really beginning to blow up a little bit more, looking more symmetrical here into the Bay of Campeche. Notice that we also still have a lot of showers and thunderstorms over the Yucatan Peninsula, so we'll have to watch and see if that kind of dies down and we'll see more of a concentration over the water. So this is not moving very much at all. This is kind of drifting more than anything else down towards the southwest around 3 miles per hour, meaning it's going to be a lingerer and will likely stay within this general area over the next several days. Not good news with that flood potential and that flood threat. We do have tropical storm warnings in effect from Veracruz all the way over towards Campeche. So generally just covers that complete area of the coastline. So there will be a little bit of storm surge from this. We'll get some gusty winds, but really the big headline will be the torrential downpours along with the heavy rain. I know Chris is going to talk a little bit more about that, but just devastating because we could be talking about 1 to 2 feet of rain in some of these areas. We put the wind vectors on here and you could really see pretty clearly that area of circulation where the low pressure center is, and that's something we'll continue to have to watch. And you can see that all sides are looking a little bit more robust within this. So we do think this could potentially move a little bit closer towards land or kind of linger in here, and the intensity of this could fluctuate a little bit, especially if the center does go over land, even temporarily, because it does create some friction. It slows it down. Keep in mind that the warm water temperatures is the fuel for a tropical storm. Eventually, we'll watch this begin to drift up towards the north. That's not going to happen until we head towards the weekend, and that's when we need to be a little bit more concerned about the U.S. impacts. Notice the water temperature is plenty warm for that. We need 80 degrees or better to sustain a tropical system, and we have that pretty widespread. Notice the temperature's a little bit cooler into the northern Gulf, but if we take a look at what the forecast is and where these models are putting this with time, the HWRF, for example, some of the models do bring it over the warmer water, which could potentially keep it a little bit stronger. So not seeing a huge consensus on any of these models. I'd say all interests in the Gulf need to pay very close attention to this, especially as we head towards the weekend. So kind of interesting, Chris, how this all kind of evolved, that Central American gyre. Not unusual to get spin-ups off of that, but that this was actually kind of the remnants of what was a tropical storm in the Eastern Pacific.
That's right, and its name was Amanda. Had it kept that center of circulation that was obvious as it came over Central America and across and it through Mexico, it would have remained, but it didn't. It broadened out. Unfortunately, what does remain, cleanup and destruction, the aftermath from this system in El Salvador here, and parts of Guatemala also getting hit very hard. As meteorologist Tevin Wooten explains, one reason the storm proved so damaging here is that it battered El Salvador for days.
The muscular powers of floodwaters. Cars swept off a street and down an embankment. Amanda dropping a foot of rain on Central America over the weekend. Another 10 to 20 inches could drown southern Mexico and its neighboring countries in the days ahead. Sonia Aguilera says floodwaters never reached the top of the bridge before. Aguilera says it's God's miracle she's alive. The mayor of El Salvador's capital city says at least 50 homes have been wiped out. Reports say 900 others have been lost around the country. First responders are wearing masks to guard against COVID-19. One natural disaster now compounded by another.
And as we look at the amount of rain that came in Central America and Mexico, you can see the pink and the darker pink and then the light pink, anywhere from a foot to a foot and a half, even pockets of more than 2 feet of rainfall in less than a week.
We've got a new intermediate public advisory in from the National Hurricane Center on Tropical Storm Cristobal. The winds have come up a little bit, from 40 to 45 miles per hour. Those are the maximum sustained winds, relatively close to the center of circulation, which is down there in the Bay of Campeche, and it's not far offshore and moving south at 3 miles an hour, so it probably will make landfall sometime tomorrow. And it's going to be a slow process, right? But since it's over water right now, it's still tapping into the very warm fuel of the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. And also I noticed too that we're getting a preference for the thunderstorms to be more near the center. It's kind of shedding those outer bands. We know that it's gotten stronger because of the Air Force hurricane hunters went through within the last hour, and with that step frequency microwave radiometer instrument remotely sensing from about 1,500 to 2,000 feet up what the winds are at the surface, and they've come up to 45 miles an hour. With this intermediate advisory, we don't have a new track and intensity forecast. That'll come out by 11 p.m. Eastern time. But I think we're going to have plenty of time to watch this one as it spends some time over land and likely re-strengthens this weekend approaching the northern Gulf Coast. You know you're going to watch us here on Weather Underground every night this week as we continue to cover this tropical storm. Remember, together, we know more.
Yes4 weather with Chief Meteorologist Craig Setzer.
Well, pretty steamy evening here in South Florida, and it's very tropical feeling, and it's tropical looking too. We have Tropical Storm Cristobal now in the far southern Gulf of Mexico, far southwest Gulf of Mexico. Getting better organized tonight. You can see the thunderstorms there kind of consolidating a bit towards the center. Some of the thunderstorms, though, over land producing a tremendous amount of rainfall. For the next day or so, that's going to be the big problem, is flooding rains there in the Yucatan into Central America. 50-mile-an-hour winds now. It's just drifting to the south. The forecast is for it to continue to drift. May make landfall during the next couple of days before it finally starts to move back to the north. So then here we are on the Friday time frame, and then going into the weekend. It is forecast to move to the north. As I was saying earlier, there's very, very little risk of it suddenly taking a turn far, far to the east like that. But anytime a system is redeveloping or organizing, sometimes the center does jump around. So this whole track could slide a bit to the east. That might bring a little bit wetter weather our way for the weekend. But right now, I think it's just something we need to watch and not get too excited about. There is the moisture associated with the tropical storm, and some of that moisture peels away and comes into South Florida, especially for Thursday and Friday. Could see some heavy downpours, even some local flooding. And then as we go into the weekend, the center lifts to the north, but as it consolidates, some drier air starts to wrap around it and into South Florida. So if this pattern holds, this would be pretty good. A mix of sun and clouds, some spotty showers Saturday and Sunday, maybe some afternoon storms. But if the track does shift to the east, while the core of the system wouldn't be close to us, that tropical moisture tail might be closer to us. So just something to watch in the coming days.
Tropical update. If you haven't heard about this, this is an unprecedented season so far in our tropical storm hurricane season. Officially begins for the Atlantic Basin on the 1st of June. But even before that, we had 2 named storms, and now we're already to the 3rd named storm. This is a Tropical Storm Cristobal, and as it's just off the Bay of Campeche, it's been churning around, has been strengthening lately, and is expected to be maybe a little bit stronger, but then to go more inland. But at this time in our history for tropical storms and hurricanes in the United States, as we tracked them for our National Hurricane Center, we have never had 3 named storms this early in the season. That's the unprecedented part to it. In the satellite imagery, you can see the storm's been churning, and as the storm's churning, it's actually expected to just stay pretty stationary, wobble back and forth. Bay of Campeche, Veracruz over to Campeche, and then just west of there actually goes inland. And then over a few days into the end of the week, closer to the weekend, we'll finally move back into the Bay of Campeche and then northward through the rest of the Gulf, and then move northward and eventually could make some landfall to the United States. But that's going to be by the end of the weekend into the following week from here. You can see the National Hurricane Forecast track. That's what we say is our cone of uncertainty, the forecast fan. On either side of that looks to be an uncertain location that anywhere within there could be the track of the not hurricane, but a tropical storm is expected to be at this time. Not expected to be maybe a hurricane status. Could still happen. I've seen outside chances. But anywhere from Houston, Galveston, all the way over near Mobile, Alabama, possibly as far as even Pensacola, Destin. I could say everybody needs to be watching this forecast with Weather Nation all throughout the time, the weekend up until then. New Orleans specifically, I'm speaking to you. Be very aware of this storm. Each one of these lines is a different computer forecast, and a lot of those lines are clustered to have it coming in straight up to New Orleans. It is this time of the year into June where it's the Gulf showing the greatest potential over our history books to have at least hurricanes and tropical storms that have formed in the past, and especially for the area that's just off the Florida coast and just south of Alabama.
And this morning, Tropical Storm Cristobal gaining strength with deadly flooding already occurring across Central America. This slow-moving storm, and we're talking about 3 miles per hour here, will track across the Gulf of Mexico late this week and head toward the United States. Residents from Texas to Florida need to be on alert, even if you don't get the center. And we'll talk about what that means here in just a moment. We are tracking our third named storm of what has been a very busy hurricane season so far. We're only in day 3 of it, or day 2 of it. I think, what is today, the 3rd or the 2nd? I don't even know. It's June 3rd. It's the 3rd day. Anyway, welcome back into AMHQ this morning. Jim, Jen, and Steph all here to get you out the door, over the hump, as they say. Obviously, I need a little help myself. Summer heat rolling across the country, helping fuel 1,500 miles of storminess. We'll get to that in just a minute. Several of you will get several rounds of thunderstorms. But first, we got an eye on the tropics for you this morning. Here's Cristobal unleashing heavy rains across parts of Central America and Mexico, bringing on dangerous, life-threatening flooding here, as has been stated really since the beginning of this, when it was Amanda. Watch as drivers try to navigate the floodwaters here in Nicaragua on Monday. The National Hurricane Center says parts of Central America, parts of southeast Mexico could get 2 feet of rain over the next several days. And that's the problem here, Steph. For the next couple of days, this thing's not going to move all that much.
And by the way, I think the legacy of this, no matter how it ends up in the United States or in what form, is going to be rain. This is not going to be a massive wind maker as of right now. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, but it's going to be rain, and especially on the east side. So this thing is going to be lopsided throughout its life. And you see, this is a look at the visible satellite here yesterday. You see the explosion of thunderstorms mainly on the east side. We're waiting for that visible satellite to come up this morning, because you need the sun. The visible satellite is as if you're sitting on the moon taking video, so you need that light in order to see it. So it's going to linger around the Bay of Campeche. By the way, could be making its first landfall in Mexico over the next couple of days, because it's drifting off to the southeast about 3 miles an hour. Now, right now, the models likely have it moving towards the U.S., but what does it look like? Will it be ragged? Will it be fully east side loaded? Regardless, it looks like a trough's going to be able to pull up some moisture, just like a straw. All right, you might be using a straw this morning to drink your drink. That's what our trough is going to do, and it's going to suck that moisture up into the United States, mainly on the east side of this system, no matter how it looks. Heavy rain is going to be our biggest threat. So there are your winds at 60 miles an hour. In order to be a hurricane, winds have to be at 74. But as you look at the modeling, right now it looks like it'll stay a tropical storm. But notice the west side of this thing. A lot drier than the east side of this. That's where I have all those thunderstorms here over the Yucatan, and so tremendous flooding is going to be a problem for us here. And there's a look at the high resolution winds, right? And so that center circulation is still just offshore, but what will the interaction with land do to this thing? It'll knock it down a little, right? It'll knock down those winds. It'll knock down the strength, because it needs that ocean to fuel it. And sometimes it can kind of shift these systems around. So exactly where that center ends up over Mexico will then determine what it's going to do for us here in the U.S. So what you need to be doing if you live from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, I want to give everyone along the Gulf Coast a notice here that you need to be paying attention to this. There is the dry air on the west side of the system, moist air on the east side of this system. So rainfall here into Mexico, also portions of Central America, because it's within our gyre still that's pumping out the rain here.
earliest third name storm beating Colin, that was in 2016. But again, where exactly, Jim, that center ends up after it interacts with land, how much time it stays over land, that could change things.
I don't want anybody to focus too much on the specific track, but rather the cone, because that cone clearly shows you that everything in Louisiana will likely be impacted. Obviously, the further south, the more the impact that you can expect. The most reasonable worst-case scenario that we've been told by the National Weather Service is to expect 10 to 15 inches of rain on the east side of the storm. That's going to fall over a 48-hour period. That's a lot of rain. That's especially a lot of rain if it's falling on ground that's already saturated from several days' worth of tropical storms. Further west could be 8 to 10 inches of rain. And literally it just sort of depends on exactly where the center of the storm is, but 8 to 10 inches could be what you see in Baton Rouge, or it may actually be further west and so forth. We should know more, obviously, before the storm makes landfall. I do want everybody to notice that the National Weather Service has already issued flash flood warnings through Tuesday of next week in some areas of Louisiana. Part of the good news is river levels are much lower than they were last year when we had the hurricane. And so there's more capacity for rainfall to be taken into those rivers before you have substantial flooding activity. And certainly we don't have any threat to levee overtopping or anything like that along the Mississippi River. One of the challenges we're going to face will be with wind. Typically you don't think of tropical storms producing enough wind to have heavy damage, but when you have saturated ground, it doesn't take as much wind in order to cause real problems with trees and utility poles and things like that. So the wind that we expect could be 60 miles an hour or so, and obviously this could get refined as we move forward. Obviously, storm surge along the coast is one of those things that we're looking at very hard and preparing for. We are tracking 678 gates in the coastal zone. 157 of those are currently closed. Every gate and the flood control structures in the state of Louisiana across the coastal zone have been exercised with respect to their operation criteria as part of our preparation for hurricane season. Everyone should be following the news and the weather updates from their local officials. Now is the time to prepare. Put yourself and your family in the best possible position to ride out the first 72 hours of this storm and make sure that you get a game plan. You can go to getagamePlan.org. It is obviously not too late to do that. It's really important that you do, and it's also important that you take notice of the differences between preparing for a natural disaster when we have the public health emergency for COVID-19, because there are some differences, and obviously there are a lot of similarities too. So make sure that you're stocked with essential supplies like batteries, water, cell phone chargers, necessary prescriptions, masks, or other facial coverings, hand sanitizer. The mitigation measures that we have in place remain critically important and should be taken into account as you make your hurricane preparations. And we transitioned to phase 2 on.
So you've been listening to the governor of Louisiana, kind of briefing the residents there about the potential tropical impacts on the way by the end of the weekend into early next week, and how you have to think differently with COVID-19 and the health emergency that's ongoing at the same time.
Tropical Storm Cristobal has made landfall in southern Mexico earlier today. The country is now bracing for flooding and mudslides. Let's get right to hurricane specialist Brian Norcross live in Miami Beach with more on this. Brian.
Hi, Louie. Yeah, this system is over Mexico now, and it's going to weaken over Mexico, but continue to dump rain, as you said. Let's take a look at it on the satellite. here is Cristobal down to the south down here. Now, we have this tremendous amount of rain to the north. It's not related to that, as Betty was saying. It's an upper level disturbance that's going to move on through. And then we're going to deal with the fringes of Cristobal as we go forward. Let's go in and take a look at the radar out of Mexico here. And we can make out right near this town of Ciudad de Carmen there. That's where the center is. And it's going to stay over land. Now, as it's over land, it's probably going to weaken down to a tropical depression, and it may essentially die out. And we were recording the podcast this afternoon and had a conversation with Ken Graham at the National Hurricane Center talking about exactly what they're going to do in the future if it dies out. We have a brand new advisory here from the Hurricane Center, and then we'll talk about that more in a second. 50-mile-an-hour storm, so it's down a little bit, and it's moving southeast at 5, so heading in this direction here, it's going to loop back up to the north, so it's got some pretty good time there over the land. Here's the cone, brand new cone, and you see there it is over land as it goes the next couple days. So there Friday afternoon, it's still close to the coast here, 35-mile-an-hour tropical depression at that point, and then heads up on into the Gulf of Mexico. So the thinking is still that the center is going to stay well to the west of us, but all of the bad weather with this storm is going to be over here. And we've got a couple scenarios depending on how strong the core of the storm is. So there's the center of Cristobal. Now, if it's a fairly strong storm, it's going to pull the moisture in, and we're going to be fairly dry here. But if it's weaker, it's not going to be able to do that, and we're going to be in the fringe effects of the tropical moisture. So we're not going to get the center of this. We're not going to get the winds from it, but we may get significant tropical moisture here over the weekend into early next week. And, of course, Betty's going to have lots more on that coming up, and I'll see you back in the next hour. Louie and Chris.
I will talk to you in a bit. Thank you, Brian.
A soggy start to the day as rain flooded some streets.
And we have a live look outside our North Bay Village studios. It's dry for now with cloud-covered skies across the region.
We're also keeping an eye on Tropical Storm Cristobal. Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow has it all for us. Phil.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Here are your headlines. All the heavy rain today has moved to southwest Florida. Big downpours in Key West. Record rain for you, and Cristobal made landfall in Mexico earlier today. Right now, let's take a look at some of the rainfall totals. Key West setting a record with just under 3 inches of rain. The old mark was from 1968, and you can go all the way down the list here. Fort Lauderdale getting 3/4 of an inch of rain. All the heavy rain has moved to southwest Florida, heading north now from Naples into Fort Myers. For us, looking dry, we may still see an isolated downpour later this evening. So here's the latest on Cristobal. 50-mile-per-hour winds made landfall just to the west of Ciudad del Carmen, and it is moving at a snail's pace. So it's going to stick around here across the Yucatan through Friday, weakening to a depression and then making its way back into the Gulf of Mexico, where it could go back up to tropical storm status. It is going to look for a gap between high pressure to the east and the jet stream to the west. Now, because we had so much rain today and we are expecting more, a street flood watch has been issued for South Florida, except the Keys, until Friday at 8 a.m.
And we are following Tropical Storm Cristobal tonight. It did make a landfall in Mexico in the state of Campeche. Right now, the winds are at 50 miles an hour. Looks a little ragged. The center is basically right over land. A southeast movement at 3, but expected to basically make an about face and head back north and through the Gulf of Mexico, where it could re-intensify and then take aim at the Gulf Coast, including right now, we think, potentially Louisiana in particular. Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, is with us this evening. Dr. Knabb, it's still undetermined exactly what the strength may be of this at the current trajectory, a tropical storm, but that doesn't mean it won't have impacts.
No, because it's not just about the maximum wind speed. I'm really concerned about how large and slow-moving this tropical storm will be. And you might look at this and think, well, it's not forecast to become a hurricane. I'm not that concerned. But remember, slow-moving large systems can be big water problems, including not just the inland flooding that we've been talking about from the heavy rain, but storm surge. On the right-hand side of wherever this comes ashore, we're going to have a tremendous onshore push. And even outside of areas that get storm surge, you could have a lot of rip currents and waves. Now, we have to get out of the habit of underestimating storm surge. And with tropical storms, it might seem easier to do that, but don't underestimate it. That can be one of the reasons why people don't evacuate, but you might be told to evacuate in the northern Gulf Coast areas in some spots. Also, the other reason to plan ahead, because there are other impediments to evacuating. If you don't have a plan for your pets, that might impede your evacuation. Don't let that get in the way. Plan ahead. And this year especially, with the economic hardships and the virus, we're concerned about costs. We're concerned about social distancing, and we should be. Ask for help if you need help evacuating because of cost, because you're concerned about the virus, but don't let it keep you from getting out of harm's way due to storm surge. And I want to reiterate how a tropical storm can produce deadly storm surge and other hazards. Tropical Storm Isidore made landfall in Louisiana in 2002 at about the same intensity that Cristobal is forecast to be, and Isidore was also a large system. Okay, forget the part where it was a hurricane down there. We're talking about this part of the forecast. Now, there were a lot of fatalities in Isidore. In fact, in the U.S., there were 6, and one of them was in storm surge on the Mississippi coastline in a vehicle, and the storm surge, the salt water from the Gulf of Mexico, came onto normally dry ground. Let's take a look at what that storm surge looked like. This was a few feet of salt water flooding above normally dry ground, and they had to call for evacuations in some spots, and this was not caused by a hurricane. This was caused by a large tropical storm, okay? And it took a life. And there were other fatalities as well. I'll go back to the map and show you where some of the other fatalities occur. 2 others were in Mississippi. We had a tree fall on a car, and we had cardiac arrest in a place where it was flooded and help couldn't come. So you got to stay safe and realize that flooding can be very dangerous. We had a rip current fatality in Louisiana, high surf fatality in Florida, and even inland in Tennessee, we had someone die in their vehicle due to inland flooding. So, Alex, we can't discount how dangerous tropical storms can be, especially when they're large and slow.
So it's been a substantial rainfall since midnight, and keep in mind, just yesterday we had a bunch of rain too. This is a tropical storm Cristobal, that's the name of it. Yeah, it's the 3rd one of the year already, and Cristobal made landfall in Mexico. Not a big wind maker, but a big rain maker, with the possibility of 3 feet of rain down there in Central America and Mexico. Now listen, the National Hurricane Center says this thing will survive Mexico and then head up towards the central Gulf Coast between Houston and Mobile. This late weekend, we could get a tropical storm up there in that area. We'll be back with the forecast in just a few minutes. Back to you guys.
Time for an update now on Tropical Depression Cristobal. If you're just joining us, you may not know that this was downgraded to a depression now, but don't let that fool you. We still expect this to move back over the Gulf of Mexico and intensify, regain its strength, and then taking aim at the U.S. coastline. Now, there's no intermediate advisory today, 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central. We'll see that often when their tropical storm warnings happen. So the next advisory, the next update from the National Hurricane Center, including a new track, will be coming at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Here's the latest track, and there you can see the timing of that as well as the intensity. This will be moving through the open waters of the Gulf all day Saturday with potential landfall here on Sunday.
Well, it's that time of year, the first couple of days here of official Atlantic Basin hurricane season. We're already on storm number 3 now. Perhaps, I don't know, I wouldn't even call this good news necessarily, but Cristobal no longer considered to be a tropical storm, is a tropical depression. Worth noting when we're talking about those designations, tropical depression versus tropical storm, that is in reference to those sustained winds. But the big concern with this storm, certainly for southern Mexico and throughout parts of Central America, it is the heavy rain and the mudslides that's already produced and could continue to produce over the next little while. Meteorologist Chris Bianchi, thanks for joining us here on Weather Nation. We're tracking Tropical Depression Cristobal as it gradually moves its way to the east-southeast, now moving through the northern part of Guatemala, and eventually is going to try and push east here into Belize and the southern part of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The center of the storm is disorganized. When you're talking about the center of a storm that's over land, it tends to weaken, and again, that is primarily in reference to those sustained winds. So because this is a tropical depression, that doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination to let your guard down. In fact, here, because the center of the storm is over the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, we're going to be seeing some, unfortunately, continuation of the dramatic flooding that we've already seen. Now, the bigger question for the Gulf of Mexico coastline is, where does this storm go over the next few days, and how strong could it get? Now, again, currently a depression. The National Hurricane Center forecast cone is as follows, and it is forecasting this storm to remain a depression for the next 48 hours or so. Once it moves back out over the warmer Gulf of Mexico waters, we do expect the storm to re-strengthen into a tropical storm as it pushes north, and eventually we expect a landfall late Sunday night or early on Monday morning in coastal parts of Louisiana. But that forecast cone of uncertainty stretches from southern Mississippi all the way west into the Golden Triangle of southeastern Texas. So a lot of areas here need to be on guard, and we could be talking about the potential for some very heavy rainfall. Earlier today, we spoke with Colorado State University hurricane expert Dr. Phil Klotzbach for more.
We use statistical models, and we use a lot of historical information to come up with these forecasts. So we basically look for precursor signals. So historically, what sets of climate conditions have preceded active and inactive seasons in the past. And so one of those predictors that you just mentioned was El Nino versus La Nina. El Nino is warmer water in the eastern and central tropical Pacific. When that occurs, it tends to increase upper level westerly winds in the Atlantic, tears apart hurricanes. Unfortunately, this year, the odds of El Nino are very, very slim. It looks more likely we're going to have La Nina, which is colder water in the tropical Pacific, which tends to cause decreased levels of shear, more conducive conditions for hurricanes to form in the Atlantic. Another big factor that we look at is what water temperatures are like in the Atlantic. Hurricanes live off of warm ocean water, so more of that warm ocean water means more fuel for the storms, and so that's another factor that looks fairly conducive for hurricane formation in 2020.
I'm Kyle Pucker. We are watching a tropical depression that is now centered over Mexico, a very disorganized system right now, and we think it's probably going to remain disorganized over the next day or so. The center is actually over land right now, and it will be for the next 12 to 24 hours. A lot of times that would spell the end of a tropical system, but it is a large system, so it may be able to make it through that. There's also a fair amount of dry air in the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, so a lot of limiting factors, and at this point it looks like it's probably going to be a tropical storm as it makes its way towards the northern Gulf Coast. That's going to be late in the weekend. Could be wind and surge and heavy rain with that. We will have complete coverage on this storm starting at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning right here on the Weather Channel.
The winds are out of the east-southeast, anywhere between 5 to 14 miles per hour. And as far as Cristobal is concerned, 35-mile-per-hour winds moving north-northeast at 7, located very close to Campeche, Mexico. And later on today, will work its way back into the Gulf of Mexico, where it will have an opportunity to strengthen. But that's if it could survive this land area, in its interaction with land. But notice how all these cloud tops from Cristobal making its way into the Florida Peninsula, and those are the ones that are loaded with moisture, at least leaving us with that good chance of seeing showers and storms throughout today. But Cristobal down the road will be impacting the Gulf Coast states, and I'll be back with more in a couple of minutes.
Oh, look at this. Wow, come to your television screen. This is spectacular. Little Beauty and the Beast action here in the Philippines. Count them. 1, 2, 3. Do you see a fourth one there?
I do.
Where is it? What's wrong with my eyes? What's wrong with my eyes?
We zoomed in.
4 water spouts here, spinning at sunset on Laguna Lake. Oh, just phenomenal. I need to see that fourth one. Where is it?
There it is on the right. Well, that's probably a rain shaft.
I only see 3. What is wrong with me?
All right, go back to the beginning of the video. We all got it. Now we're obsessed.
We got better eyes. In between the 2 on the left, we're told.
Really?
Who sees it?
Boy, you guys got good eyes.
Oh, you guys do have good eyes. This is the largest inland body of water of the Philippines, covering an area of about 350 square miles. Local reports said at one point there were at least 5 water spouts dancing across the water back on May 30th, just south of Manila. And I don't doubt that the 4th one and the 5th one there. I just think, Reynolds, I need to maybe get my eyes checked on that one. But what a spectacular sight.
Oh, no question about it. It's funny, the things that dazzle us like that. Certainly a great sight. Hey, the sight we're seeing this morning, Stephanie, in this location right here on the Causeway Bridge, this is northbound traffic that's slowly coming out. But although this is northbound, the weather in Florida is going south. Let's take a look at what's happening there today. You see the scattered showers and storms. They're going to drift through the Sunshine State, overcast conditions at times, heavy rainfall coming in from the tropics. And sure enough, they cause things to be slow and go, not only at your airports, but obviously in a lot of your roads. You got 75, I-95, A1A, my goodness, all these places. Alligator Alley also could be affected. So folks, take it easy out there. As we drive our way through mid to late morning, we see more of the same. Sure enough, we go forward over even the next several days, we're going to see more of the onslaught, not only affecting places like Florida or, well, the Panhandle, but moving into southern Alabama. Bayou Battery, certainly Gulf Shores could be affected, parts of, say, Biloxi, Mississippi, over towards Gulfport, and of course, Louisiana. Problems are going to abound, all due from, again, more of the moisture, all the wind, all the problems. That's the latest we have for you in terms of your travel. Be careful out there. More updates coming up in just a few moments. Let's send it back to you guys.
All right, so let's have a look now at Florida, and we've just been getting soaked. We had a little piece of energy over us. Look at Stuart, Florida, almost up to the boats there. That is wild, right? 5 inches of rain, not enough to float those boats in Stuart, but it was close. Meanwhile, less than an inch in Fort Lauderdale. Look at the flooding that caused there, but we're just so above average, right? And hard-hit Martin County with 13 inches of rain. There should have been more than enough for this woman to maybe turn around and find another route, but she's plowing ahead through there. We don't know what they're saying there, how that ended up, but you definitely want to turn around in these scenarios. So let's talk about Cristobal and notice all the dry air that's getting into this system here. These are all the clouds. This is all dry air, and it's going to be fighting this dry air all the way until it comes ashore here in the U.S. So we're just starting to see that low-level circulation, which, by the way, is away from all of that convection for us here. And, you know, you want, well, these storms, they want to have that convection around the circulation, and we don't see that right now, so it's still very ragged. Mid to level moisture right here, mid to upper level moisture, again, away from that circulation. And then this dry air is just charging forward right into this thing. And notice this, dry air is going to be all the way through its path.
Cristobal is expected to make landfall late this weekend or early next week. And we have, as a result, tropical storm watches now in effect for parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and nearby areas of Alabama as well. Those are in the expectation that tropical storm winds, force winds over 40 miles per hour will be moving through the region, as well as very heavy rain and all of the other hazards that accompany a landfalling tropical cyclone, namely, well, we have the strong damaging wind potential, of course, and the flooding rains, as well as storm surge flooding in addition to that. So all hazards are on the table as we will watch. Gradually, Cristobal will be moving northward today, but then begin to accelerate over the weekend. There it is on Saturday. The center likely passing inside of this cone as a tropical storm crossing the Louisiana coast, likely late Sunday or early Monday, and carrying with it its bad weather inland from there. It's not going to stop at the coast. It is going to move inland and bring some gusty winds and, of course, heavy rainfall along the path, likely going into the Midwest and even Great Lakes by the middle of next week. A couple of key messages to take away from all of that. The risk of tropical storm force winds is real and is probably growing, and it does extend over a very large distance outside of the cone from Louisiana through parts of the Florida Panhandle. That would be wind gusts in excess of 40 miles per hour. In addition to that, dangerous storm surge flooding is possible from Louisiana into areas around the Big Bend and, of course, very heavy rainfall. This is what Cristobal looks like right now, with the center of circulation right about there and much of the bad weather located in arcs, long distances away from the center. That is going to be one of the characteristics going forward. Exactly why we shouldn't necessarily focus all of our attention on where the center of circulation is, because even now we're seeing that the strongest winds in excess of 30 miles per hour over the water are a long way from where the center of circulation is. And Alex, this is going to remain the case throughout its lifetime, carrying bad weather all the way through large distances away from the center. Back to you.
Shape itself, that's the very quick version of it, but also the center of the storm in history has gone outside of the cone as well. And right now, it is still, a lot of it is still over the Yucatan Peninsula here in Mexico. It once again, if you're just now joining us today, it is again a tropical storm. It was a depression for a while, so those winds have dropped down, but they're back up above 39 miles an hour at 40 miles an hour right now, and it is moving to the north as we've been expecting it to. It is moving at 12 miles an hour right now. We just saw some video coming in to the Weather Channel a little bit earlier of what it looks like to be in Cancun and under this kind of weather. It's pretty nasty, frankly, and this is heading to the north. It's heading to the U.S. So some areas going to get a pretty big hit of wind and rain out of this. In fact, the National Hurricane Center's forecast does have it as a 60-mile-an-hour storm. So as nasty as what we've seen already with this in Mexico, the winds are expected to be even stronger as it approaches land here in the United States, somewhere between East Texas and Mobile, essentially, as far as the realm of possibilities go with this. So we still got a little time to figure out, not a lot, but stay with us here on the Weather Channel for that.
Okay, rain through Vero. It's just light drizzle. Same deal as we take in towards Okeechobee. So again, it's been a nonstop day of tropical moisture. We've been dealing with this plume of tropical moisture from what was Tropical Depression Cristobal. Now it is Tropical Storm Cristobal as it continues to move off the Yucatan Peninsula. And to be honest, it looks better organized this afternoon. Winds are at 40 miles per hour. Still, the track hasn't shifted, looking for a landfall as we go through Sunday night into early Monday, anywhere from eastern Texas back out towards Louisiana. For the main threats, it's just going to be a heavy rainmaker. They can handle winds 50 or 60 miles per hour. So it's not going to be a big wind event. It's going to be a big rainmaker. But as long as Cristobal is in the Gulf of Mexico, we're still dealing with all that tropical moisture moving in. And you can see, again, a couple more days of this stuff, and then we finally start to turn the corner. Another batch moves in for tomorrow. Then we do it again on Sunday. Finally, by Monday, looks like Cristobal out of the picture. Then we get a weak front to work its way in, and there'll be some drier air behind that front. And thank goodness we turn off the faucet here across the area.
Mandatory evacuation in place for Grand Isle, Louisiana kicks in tomorrow morning. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards declares a state of emergency. East Baton Rouge Parish is placing sand and sandbags at 8 different locations. A lot going on here, unleashing some pretty violent winds when it was over in Mexico, including over in Cancun. This is away from the center. Look at this. This should give you some indication of what could be coming our way here on the northern Gulf Coast. That's a tropical storm, folks. Well, it's rocking and rolling, isn't it? And Dr. Nab, when you look at images like that, what does that tell you about what we should be preparing for in Louisiana and Mississippi and Florida Panhandle and Alabama?
Well, Micah, envision some condition like that occurring potentially in a place like downtown New Orleans, and those strong winds, those horizontal rains funneling between buildings could have some debris flying through the air, loose objects, could take out the power, could down some trees. I mean, when you got sustained winds of 50, 60 miles an hour, the gusts could reach 70, 80. I mean, tropical storms are not to be completely dismissed, all right? And we've got wind and water impacts to deal with. We are expecting it to strengthen from its current intensity of 40 miles an hour to something maybe around 60. Large systems don't go up and down in intensity very quickly, but this one has a couple days over water to strengthen some. And a mid-grade tropical storm, especially a large one, can be a big problem. And when they're large, it means a long duration event and a lot of water problems, okay? And the winds of tropical storm force extend out almost 250 miles to the north and the east. And so you're going to have impacts outside of this cone, and the large system is going to last a long time after it makes landfall. So a lot of people inside and outside the cone, coastal and inland, wind and water, going to have a lot to deal with. Tropical storm warning in effect for places like New Orleans, all the way over to the Destin-Fort Walton Beach area. And that kind of wind could take out power. So we got to be preparing for power outages and prepare for the winds of tropical storm force arriving maybe tomorrow night into early Sunday even before, maybe by a day before the center comes ashore, say Sunday night. Storm surge warning in effect outside the risk reduction system in southeast Louisiana, Gulf Coast of Mississippi. Storm surge watch Big Bend of Florida. If evacuations are called by local officials in these areas, you got to go, because you get to 3 feet of storm surge flooding, that salt water from the Gulf, it can be life-threatening. Again, look how long duration the rain is going to be. It's going to start tomorrow evening in places like New Orleans and Gulfport, and it's going to last all the way into Monday, all the way into Tuesday for places that are inland. Mike and Alex.
Yes, mandatory evacuation 6 a.m. tomorrow here in Grand Isle. Meanwhile, photo op city, look at the sky tonight. I mean, this is worth the price of admission. And what you see, we're starting to lose that orange edge there. That's the outer band, the cirrus shield, that's rotated in from Cristobal, which is hundreds of miles away. What, last check, about 480 miles south of the mouth of the Mississippi River. And then you see the horizon with the orange, and then the stratus clouds, which were around today. We had one little shower late morning, and that was it. It's been a very dry day. That is really going to change as we get into tomorrow night and especially Sunday, even into Monday morning. Speaking of the surf, this is from early this afternoon, just down the coast a bit at the Grand Isle State Park, and I went out on the pier so you get a sense of the waves rolling into the beaches. These are about 2, maybe 3 footers. That's it. We're a long way away from that swell, and that's going to start rotating in and propagating towards the coast tomorrow. In fact, the National Weather Service marine forecast here for Sunday and Sunday night puts breakers out here 15 to 20 feet. We'll have continuing coverage. We're on late tonight all weekend. We've got crews up and down the coast in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana.
And we have the new advisory from the National Hurricane Center as of 11 p.m. Comes in a little bit earlier, 11 Eastern, 10 Central. Now a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm, so it is slowly strengthening and also moving a little bit more quickly north at 14 miles per hour, now 440 miles south of the mouth of the Mississippi River. We think the impacts are going to be being felt tomorrow, certainly along the southern part of Louisiana, and then it's going to just continue to get worse into tomorrow evening and certainly so into Sunday morning. This is the latest forecast track and intensities from the National Hurricane Center, and you see the storm getting up to strong tropical storm intensity, and the models have been pretty consistent on that point, and I'll explain why here in just a second. So we think it's most likely going to be not a hurricane, but a strong tropical storm, but a very large storm, and the impacts are going to be felt well away from that center all across the northern Gulf Coast into Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. So a lot of people being affected by this storm over the next several days. Here is a part of what Dr. Nab was talking about, an absolutely enormous circulation covering a huge area of the Gulf of Mexico. And you see all this weather extending from the center of circulation out to the north here and out to the east. And that is going to be the structure of this storm as it comes up and into the northern Gulf Coast. So we expect that weather to be well away from the center. Now, another thing that you see here is this dry air, that orange color, wrapping in on the west side of the circulation. And some of that air comes in underneath the circulation and gets in towards the center of the circulation. That, too, is going to bother the system a little bit. When you've got warm and humid air wrapped completely around a circulation, makes it a lot easier for thunderstorms to form about that center and a lot easier for the storm to become more organized and get stronger more quickly. When you've got some dry air infiltrating, that process takes a lot longer. And that's another part of the reason why we think it is most likely going to top out as a tropical storm. But don't think that it's not going to be a threat. It certainly is going to be a threat because it is such a large storm. We've got tropical storm warnings in effect, and storm surge is also going to be an enormous issue because of the nature of the coastline there, because you've got a very shallow continental shelf, and because it is a large circulation that's going to be coming up through several high tide cycles, most notably starting tomorrow, but Sunday morning is when those winds are going to maximize along with the high tide cycle. We're going to have much more on Cristobal coming up in just a few minutes.
weekend. Now, as far as Storm Tracker is concerned, we are picking up on a few showers offshore, but very isolated nature. You'll notice the bulk of the moisture right now remains offshore over near the Florida Straits and across the Gulf Coast states. Right now, our friends in Naples and in Fort Myers about to get some strong thunderstorm activity pushing through the area. For us, we've been okay, but the moisture is definitely present. Take a look at all this green. That's the available tropical moisture over Florida. All of this is associated with Tropical Storm Cristobal over the Gulf of Mexico. You'll notice all of the cloud cover and the thunderstorms are displaced from the center. Right now, as of 5 a.m., maximum sustained winds of 45 miles per hour as it continues to lift north across the Gulf of Mexico. So we have tropical storm watches and warnings along the Gulf Coast states. We have storm surge watches across areas of Louisiana into Mississippi. This system is forecast to make landfall later on the weekend at some point during Sunday afternoon as a tropical storm somewhere along the Gulf Coast.
Welcome back to Weather Nation. We're giving you...
Hey, welcome back to Weather Nation on this Saturday morning. Thanks for joining us for your weekend edition. Some folks obviously out taking some pictures before stronger impacts of Cristobal will be felt later today. We continue to track the tropical storm as it's gaining speed and moving quickly northward through the Gulf.
And places like Mobile, Alabama, you can see all is well right now, but as always with the tropical system, we have that calm before the storm. Later tonight, especially into Sunday, we're going to be seeing big changes for this part of the country.
That's right. We're tracking those changes all along the Gulf Coast, including Florida today, experiencing some very heavy rainfall already. Tropical storm force winds could arrive as early as late tonight along the Gulf Coast. We want to help get you prepared ahead of those big time impacts.
And you still have time to prepare. We do want to stress that because the hazards aren't really going to arrive as far as the winds go until this evening, maybe even overnight for some of us.
That's right. You still have to watch out though for heavy rain, maybe some thunderstorms well out ahead of this storm because we're going to be feeling impacts well away from the center of Cristobal.
And we're already seeing some of the outer moisture moving away from this system into places like central and southern Florida, where we've even had some thunderstorms earlier this morning. But you can see the location. It has strengthened a little bit. Winds at 50 miles per hour. Pressure has dropped, and the more the pressure drops, we're going to see that increase in intensity in the storm. And it's moving pretty quickly to the north at 12 miles per hour. And I say quickly because if we go back a few days, it was only moving at 1 to 2 miles per hour.
Yeah, you know, Greg, I'm looking at the satellite picture, as I know you have been all day. It doesn't have the look of a classical tropical cyclone, right? It's very eastern side loaded, which is not unusual, but it almost looks like a comma cloud and an extratropical cyclone. Does that matter when it comes to impacts?
Yes, it does, because what it's telling us, there's the picture that you're looking at. You can see that comma projection that you're talking about. It kind of, the rains are bent like that. That tells us that there's not a lot of thunderstorm activity right near the core of this circulation of the rotation, meaning that it's probably not going to strengthen quickly. It hasn't strengthened yet today, according to the Hurricane Center. The hurricane hunters will be flying in, Jen, later on this afternoon. They'll give us a better estimate of what's going on in the core there. But there's not a lot of cloud actually here in the middle of it. So that's good news, saying at least maybe this is not in position to strengthen quickly at all. There's a lot of dry air that's gotten in the middle of it. But the problem is, Jen, as you know, where you are in Biloxi, way up there, you're getting rain. You're getting the outer periphery of this thing, as are many folks along the Florida coast as well. So the impacts are distantly removed from that relatively clear air in the middle.
Right. I mean, we're 24 hours before a potential landfall of this system, you know, somewhere along the coastline up here. And
yeah, sorry, we lost that communication there, Jen. We're going to be dealing with this for a ways yet to come. And if you want to look at where the strongest winds are still associated with Cristobal, they are right here. According to the modeling that we're getting at, this is not with a lot of aircraft data in there, but the idea is that the 30-mile-per-hour sustained winds are still out over the Gulf of Mexico. We might, Chris, still see some gusty winds and showers right along the immediate Gulf Coast over 30 as some of those outer rain bands come in. But the worst of the weather still, at least wind-wise, is offshore. Chris.
And Dr. Postel, when there's a tropical system out there, I know you're not getting a lot of sleep. You're looking at the latest information. You know I'm right, too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at it almost 24 hours a day, as much as possible. So knowing that, knowing the kind of person you are, the kind of meteorologist, the expert that you are, what's the weather data that you're most interested in today over the either hour by hour or with the next forecast run? What to you is most interesting with this?
I want to see the satellite pictures hour by hour and indeed see if there are any changes out here in the middle of where the circulation is. If we start to see more clouds, some thunderstorms in the middle of it, that would suggest that perhaps this is acquiring a different bit of character in the middle of it, because it needs to do that in order for it to strengthen quickly. Now, it may strengthen a little bit. There's some other factors ongoing, and that's the expectation that as it moves northward, it will likely strengthen at least a little bit as it crosses the coast, eventually the center. So that's one of the things I'm going to be watching, Chris, is the satellite changes throughout the day. The other thing is watching the radars very carefully along the coast here, because a lot of the rain coming in, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of wind shear. And some of these rain bands are coming in with low top supercells, meaning there's little spinners in there that could produce water spouts and some brief tornadoes. That is something to watch throughout the afternoon. Chris.
So, Dr. Posta, you said you're going to watch for the additional showers and thunderstorms around the center. For those following along at home, which satellites are you going to be using the most? What's your preference?
Let's go with the visible for now. I like to do that. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this one and show you what I mean by not a whole lot going on in the middle of where this thing is spinning around. This is basically the center of circulation at low levels, Chris, where Cristobal is. And you can practically from space see the ocean surface. So this is a little bit of an enhancement here, so the ocean would look blue, or a different color. But yes, visible I would look at, and a lot of IR as well, infrared, to show you the tops of some of the clouds that eventually develop, and water vapor, which also would tell us how much dry air is coming in at middle and high altitudes, generally above 15,000 feet, because if there's a lot of it, that's going to likely try to keep this thing thunderstorm free in the middle. Chris.
And you said the IR because you want to see the tops. You want to know how tall they are, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that tells us that's measuring the temperature essentially of the cloud. So that gives us an idea of the vertical depth and the extent of those clouds. If they're shallow, they're not likely to produce a lot of heating in a way that would strengthen it. But if they're real tall and you see a lot of bright reds and oranges in the middle, then we could be dealing with more trouble than we want. Chris.
Now for a check of the tropics. Yes, we're keeping a close eye on the Gulf. Tropical Storm Cristobal, latest advisory keeps it as a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. We're still looking at most of the moisture, most of the thunderstorm activity far removed from the storm. So we are going to see some widespread impacts here starting from Louisiana eastward. And you're noticing not much change in the forecast track. The official forecast track keeping it along the coastline of Louisiana as we approach Sunday evening, and then eventually pushing inland by Monday morning. Still tropical storm with 40-mile-per-hour winds. We'll see some inland flooding from this storm system, especially with those tropical storm force winds pushing all of that water. You'll notice the tropical storm force winds between 70 and 80%, mainly confined to our coastal communities and some of those inland areas of Louisiana. Meanwhile, for us east of I-45, there'll be about 5–10%. You may feel those tropical storm winds. There is a tropical storm warning in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana, eastward toward the Big Bend of Florida. That panhandle area will also be dealing with storm surge, but those storm surge warnings mainly confined to about the mouth of the Mississippi River to Ocean Springs, Mississippi. That's what's highlighted in those pinks, and that's also where we will see the highest storm surge, anywhere between 3 to 5 feet there, and then closer toward the west coast of Florida between 1 to 4 feet. So here is what future track is showing. We'll see those outer rain bands impacting the coastline as early as tonight, and then continue to see it intensify as we get into Sunday morning. We are on the clean side of this, so the worst of the storm will be playing out to the north and east of where the eye makes landfall. Possibility of some brief tornadoes as well. You put it all together, take a look at the comparison of rain over the next 3 days. We'll be sitting with less than ½ an inch. Meanwhile, areas to our east, we're projecting anywhere between 4 to 8 inches. Isolated amounts up to 12 inches. So no doubt they're going to be dealing with some flash flooding issues there.
Let's talk a little bit more about the structure of this storm. And you've got a terrific amount of dry air on the west side of the circulation. So there are some non-tropical characteristics to the storm. A purely tropical storm is one in which you've got warm and humid air surrounding the circulation And that really allows thunderstorms to blossom near that center of circulation. In this case, because you've got this dry air, exceptionally dry air wrapping around the underside of the circulation and then coming into the center as well. You notice in the visible satellite picture, there's the center. I mean, it is almost completely exposed. Now, we probably will see more thunderstorms forming about that center, but that's one of the critical things that you need for a storm to intensify is to wrap thunderstorms about the center of circulation. And it's having a hard time doing that because of this non-tropical characteristic, this drier, more continental air that's being drawn into the circulation. So the upshot of all of that is that we don't expect a lot of intensification. It's probably going to remain a tropical storm as it comes onshore, but because it is so big, it's going to be affecting a lot of people over a long period of time. Julie, over to you.
Well, you can imagine it's a busy time for the hurricane hunters. Already this early in the season, they are out doing really important work, collecting more data on Tropical Storm Cristobal. Here's a look at the team flying out into the storm yesterday out over the Gulf of Mexico. Cool. They are brave. They're in for a bumpy ride when they get out there in that storm. But again, doing really, really important work, getting us real-time information from that storm. Latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center: Cristobal, a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm with pressure 994 millibars. And what's really important to note about this storm, the size. It's really lopsided, though. I think even our amateur weather watchers looking at this going, gosh, I don't feel like it looks like a usual tropical entity. A lot of the action on the eastern side of this system. This is now moving north 12 miles an hour. So earlier in the week, remember, we were watching this thing just creep, if not sit still. So the fact that it's moving is putting us back in play. Beginning to see the impacts, beginning to pick up that wind, and a lot of rain. Even some thunderstorms coming today into portions of the southeast, water spouts along the Gulf of Mexico, and that rip current danger also on the increase. So here is the forecast, looking at this system to move onshore late Sunday, early Monday morning. So as we go through tomorrow and into the first half of Monday, that's when things are really going to be going around the New Orleans area, eventually moving up into portions of the mid-south, Midwest. So heavy rain, Dr. Nab, is something that's going to remain a threat well into the start of next week.
And that is the biggest problem, I would say, that this situation poses. And it's typical of large storms because it lengthens the duration of the rain. You know, it's going to be, in some places, 2 days of rainy weather, and embedded in there is going to be some really heavy downpours at times. And so we've got flood watches from Baton Rouge and New Orleans all the way across the north central and northeastern Gulf of Mexico down the Florida Peninsula. That's where the flood watches are in effect. And tonight into tomorrow morning, it's northern and central Florida and along the Panhandle coast that has the greatest chance. But then during the day tomorrow, that risk will extend westward into Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And because it's so lopsided, we're already starting to get the rain. That's why the problem is already starting. You know, don't worry so much about when landfall of the center is. We're already getting waterfall of the rains of the northeastern part of this system. And Florida's been taking the brunt of the heavy rain and occasional tornado warnings today. And look at that big band that's going to be coming in and skirting the west coast here. So that could be vicious lightning and heavy rainfall, maybe some flooding. And here north of Orlando and just east of Ocala, we've got a flood warning. It's in effect in Marion County, Florida, including the Bellevue community till 8 p.m. local time. We've got a lot of problems over a large area. This is a large system. The max winds are at 50 miles an hour, but the winds of tropical storm force extend over an entire width of about 400 miles from southwest to northeast along its widest berth. But the center of action with the weather has really been in Florida today with that far-flung band. Now, we do have the NOAA hurricane hunters out there. They took off from Lakeland, Florida, got out before the weather really got bad there, right? But they've come in from the north, and now they're in the southeast quadrant. And in that southeastern quadrant, they're getting some winds on that SFMR instrument that sits on the underbelly of the wing, looks down at the ocean surface, and it estimates surface wind speeds. It's getting closer persistently to around 55 miles an hour. So we'll have to, the hurricane specialists at the Hurricane Center will have to digest that data, see if it's valid, and maybe the winds are going to come up a little bit. But that's what they're forecasting, right? They're forecasting this to be a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm at some point before it comes ashore. But that's just the maximum sustained winds. Again, it's going to be wide berth. This is going to be kind of the path of the system. It's not just within that cone. And then this path is going to take a large low, bringing a lot of moisture, a lot of rainfall well inland up into places like Iowa, Minnesota. But my gosh, look at all those isobars. This is a lot of wind that is on the northeastern side of it.
Wait till the last minute to do the hurricane prep, and there's no way to get it all done.
It's going to be a long duration event. We've got a couple of days ahead of rain and wind and surge.
Already getting a lot of rain coming into Florida.
Keeping people out of the Gulf of Mexico is close to all swimming and wading, and lifeguards are working tirelessly to ensure that happens.
Well, welcome back into our special continuing live coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal. Gulf Coast states bracing for landfall within the next 24 to 36 hours. I'm meteorologist Alex Wilson. We've got a team with you here, though, tonight to bring you the very latest, including our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. Expert analysis you can only get here on the Weather Channel. Want to get you back to Florida real quick, get you caught up on a tornado warning. This is, of course, one of those threats. You get that wind shear associated with these tropical systems, and this continues on the north side of Orlando. Had a tornado touchdown, very likely. Now, we're going to have the National Weather Service go out there and do confirmation, but according to the radar, it looks very likely that we had this touchdown very close to the executive airport, the Orlando Executive Airport on the west side, moving north from there. Reports are this has lifted, but still could produce a tornado. We're looking at Seminole County now under the warnings. Areas northeast of Altamont Springs, that will continue northward into communities like Sanford and Winter Springs. So if you're in the path of this one, lowest level, most interior room. Again, reports are it has lifted. Still, you can see that area of rotation northeast of Altamont Springs. Possibility that we could see another tornado spin up. And we have our team coverage to bring you all things Cristobal tonight. Dr. Knabb here in studio. Of course, Chris Bruin in New Iberia, Louisiana. Felicia Combs in Biloxi, Mississippi. And Mike Seidel in Grand Isle, Louisiana. So 5 meteorologists with you here tonight to keep you posted. I got to count myself, right? Dr. Knabb, we've got a new advisory to break down here from the National Hurricane Center.
Yeah, and not a whole lot of changes, but I had my computer all set up to show you something real quick, though. I wanted to just quickly recap this tornado that was east of Orlando. Here's Belle Isle. Here's the Orlando International Airport, and look at the velocity signatures showing up right there at the Beeline Expressway and Orange Avenue, and it went straight northward. This is a really long-lived tropical tornado. I haven't seen the one that lasted this long in quite a while. And look at that correlation coefficient showing up right there, right as it moved north of Belle Isle. So that was a pretty significant system, and we do have reports of confirmation on the ground that this caused some damage. And when you get the correlation coefficient and on the ground confirmation, we know there's damage. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing some reports of that. But look at that center of action where we've been dealing with flash flood warnings, tornado warnings, is in this primary outer band and another one kind of east of there that is hundreds of miles east of the center of circulation of Tropical Storm Cristobal. Now, that center is still more than 200 miles south of southeastern Louisiana. This is a big, big system. Tentacles far and wide, and this is why we've been harping all week on why we can't focus on the exact center and how many impacts could extend well outside the cone, and that's going to continue to be the case. In fact, tropical storm force winds kind of extend some 400 miles when you go southwest to northeast. So no big changes with this intermediate public advisory. We will have a complete 11 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Central, new track and intensity forecast from the Hurricane Center in about 3 hours, and we will definitely bring that to you when it comes in. But north at 12, 50 miles an hour, pressure 993. That's a low pressure for a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm, but it's using that pressure difference over a very, very large area. The visible imagery at this time of day is pretty impressive. In fact, we're seeing some overshooting tops starting to take shape there north of the center, so there's some rain coming coming in, associated with the central area. It's not just this outer banding that is the problem. Look at all that lightning has been coming into Naples, Fort Myers area. Now, we still have flash flood warnings, okay? Don't want to forget about that. This is just east of Ocala in the Bellevue, Florida area. Flash flood warning until 8:45 local time. This is up the road a piece from where the tornado warning was east of Orlando. It has rained in buckets over the last several hours, 6 inches in some spots along that corridor, and we're likely to get flash flooding tomorrow night into Monday morning in places like New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and then that problem extends inland up through Jackson, Little Rock. Alex, we got wind, we got water.
I've been switching back and forth today, watching what's happening into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's a decent-sized tornado. That's not a tropical tornado. That's a decent-sized tornado that caused damage in Orlando, Florida. We're just now getting some of the videos coming in. This was on the ground for sure there for a while because we see the power flashes, sometimes after dark. We don't know if that's actually on the ground or not unless we see a power flash. 1, 2, 3. I mean, this was a decent-sized tornado. And in some of our products, we were showing debris that was aloft, so we do know it hit something there. You can see some debris being tossed up. It's a decent-sized tree limb there. Might even be a tree. It's kind of hard to get the scale overall. But as that was moving northeastward across Seminole County, crossed over into Volusia County, where we still have a tornado warning, by the way, north of DeLand. Along I-4, basically northward, just north of DeLand, almost to Pearson. And this still has that ugly shape. That shape you look at, it's got a little curvature down at the bottom side of it. So once again, still feeling like the possibility of a tornado here into Seminole and Volusia County. The National Weather Service here is watching this out of Melbourne. And as it goes northward, let's see, we got a northward movement at about 20 to 25 miles per hour. This is 15 to 20 actually, as the storm is somewhat parallel to I-4 and then going northward. Now, through the last hour or two, we've seen this thing producing what was, again, that signature of debris that is aloft. There's a new scan coming in. That's a tornado, folks, near Sanford. I don't know if it's touching the ground, but it is well-shaped, it's well-formed, a small couplet there where everything is next to each other. And if we look at it here, this is called our CC product, which indicates where we have debris aloft. If we see some sort of difference in the coloring or some anomaly that's going on. I don't see it there at the moment, but I think this is newly somewhat developing there near Sanford and moving northward there, all the way up to Deltona and DeLand, where we have those tornado warnings. Joe, we're going to be watching that all as a result of our tropical system, and I'll come back in just a few moments, give you an update on what those warnings are. I love these shrimp boats there at Shell Island, Louisiana.
Yeah, everyone preparing there right along the coast as Cristobal continues to churn northward. And again, we've already been seeing some of the higher water levels, a little bit of storm surge flooding in some of those low-lying areas. There's another view there showing some of that water lapping ashore. And we're likely to see that as a big concern with Cristobal as it continues to make its way towards the coast. So 3 to 5 feet with storm surge possible right here into the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, southeastern Louisiana. That'll likely occur into our Sunday. Winds at 50 miles per hour. It's moving northward still at about 12 miles per hour. And here's the latest forecast. We are anticipating a little bit more strengthening before it comes ashore, at least by Sunday morning. The going forecast is an increase in central winds to about 60 miles per hour. And then as it moves inland, the winds drop off, but the threats will be far from done. We're likely to see a lot of inland flooding threat and gusty winds from time to time.
And you heard Chris say it, water over Chris's head is about double my height. So that's a significant amount of water. Chris, thanks so much for that update tonight. And Jackie, if there's any storm that is really, a good example that the impacts could be really far away from the center, I think this one might be the one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, what happened in Florida today has certainly been evidence of that, having some serious impacts there from the outer bands of Tropical Storm Cristobal, kicking up a couple of tropical tornadoes. Here's some video of that from earlier today in the Orlando metro area. We had actually 2 reports of tornadoes. They were kind of back to back. back, one sort of after the other from two different cells that pushed on through. Small amounts of damage reported, and that's about it. And that's a little bit of good news that we just had some power outages with this. We've got another view of this tornado, some other video into the Weather Channel, and there you can see this one was actually over water. I'm being told that this one was more of a water spout than anything else, and once it made its way over land, it kind of dissipated and lifted back up. So that's kind of typical with tropical tornadoes. They tend to be short-lived. They tend to spin up very quickly and can dissipate just as easily as they kick up. They're difficult to detect, even sometimes on Doppler radar, but they can and do cause some damage. There is the threat of more tornadoes here for tonight. I'm especially kind of watching to the north and northeast of the Orlando metro area. And then tomorrow, I think the Panhandle will be more at risk. And as I've been looking at the satellite imagery, there are just a couple of different things that I've noticed, that we've got some new blowups and some new bandings that are beginning to happen over open water. We'll have to keep a close eye on them and see if those continue to expand northward, because that could reach the U.S. coast later on for tonight.
So let's go through some of the details here. We'll start out with those latest conditions. Again, 50-mile-per-hour winds, storms moving north at about 12. That takes it to a path towards southern Louisiana. That's been a fairly consistent point in our modeling and continues to be in the forecast. Some strengthening is still possible, especially if this blowup of thunderstorms that we have near that center right now continues through the overnight hours. So that is something that we are going to be watching in the short term. We're also watching this plume of tropical moisture way outside of the center. It's been affecting Florida. We had severe thunderstorms from Orlando to the Space Coast. Now we've got a new blowup of thunderstorms for the southwest coast. So yeah, the center is something that's important down the road, but right now it's all about this rain. My goodness. And that includes some potential severe storms that are off the coast still. But if that circulation potential holds together, they all have that kind of kidney bean shape to them, right? That indicates high levels of shear in the environment. Can never rule out spin-up tornadoes when these storms are tied in a big circulation from the tropics. As for where the circulation center goes, we're talking about southern Louisiana. Maybe a little bit more strengthening, 50 to 60 mile-per-hour winds for that top speed. Then you lose some of the wind speed once land interaction occurs, but the precipitation shield actually comes together a little bit. So I think we actually will have a core of tropical rains go all the way up through the Midwest. Lots of spin with that. Goes back over the Mississippi River again. That Mississippi River to the north is still in flood stage, and so more water goes into the big Mississippi River watershed, and there could be a tornado threat well inland as well into the beginning of the week. Welcome back to our continuing coverage. Tropical Storm Cristobal still moving through the Gulf, heading north towards the Louisiana coastline, but it is embedded within a huge circulation with a lot of different spin. These tropical systems, as they approach land, very often produce tornadoes, and we're seeing that again. Now, I say again because earlier today around Orlando, we had some tornadoes. Jackie's going to be back to show us some of that. Let's go into what's happening right now. Tornado warning for Sarasota County, mostly south and east of Sarasota itself. If you're in Sarasota, this storm is going to slide east of you, so that is some good news. The bad news is that it is still looking pretty well put together at this point. Still moving northbound here. There's a look at the traditional mode of the radar, how much rain there is. The brighter the colors, the heavier the rain. But let's look at the motion of those raindrops. And again, very clear couplet where the reds and greens are right next to each other. Green in this case going northwest towards the radar, red southeast and away. So that's our counterclockwise spin. It's just about over I-75. So traveling I-75 south of Sarasota, about to make that big turn across South Florida. Very dangerous spot to be right now with a potential tornado coming right towards the highway. Timing that out for you, it'll be crossing the highway imminently, crossing over I-75. So again, there's all kinds of concerns with that. Most people that are traveling, especially at night, don't know exactly where they are county by county and don't know the weather that's coming, in this case, coming up from the south. So if you know someone traveling here, please let them know. It's basically right over I-75 right now. And then eventually going north from there towards a place like Shinytown just before the top of the hour. Remember, this warning goes until 1 o'clock local time. By that point, it'll be right about at the 72, Highway 72. 72. Shinytown's right in here, so a crossing 72. And then if it holds together, there would have to be a new warning after that point. But this is one of what could be several more tornado warnings this evening into the late overnight hours because, Jackie, there are still several other supercell thunderstorms just off that west coast that are still showing signs of rotation.
Yeah, so make sure you have a way to be alerted after you go to bed tonight. So important to wake up and get to your safe place. We've got some new video to show you of that tornado that moved through the Orlando area today. Wow, look at that. Trying to telestrate over that, but can you see that? That pieces of debris there getting lofted up into the air. This is an incredible view that we have of the tornado and lots of different pieces of things that it's hitting getting lofted up. It's incredible to see too because this is a weak tornado, right? Not a very tight rotation there, but it was enough to cause damage and really lift up whatever it was that it hit and bring those large pieces flying and lofted into the air and just thrown out ahead of it. This was one of two tornadoes that developed today. There you can see this is another view of a tornado. And this is, I wonder if this is the Lake Conway one. I've been seeing some storm reports of a tornado over Lake Conway. Of course, when it's over water, we call that a water spout. And you can clearly see that that is a big funnel and the water gets caught up and lifted up into that updraft there. So it makes it really visible and makes it look very ominous. I believe this was the one that moved over the water, and then once it made its way towards land, it actually dissipated and lifted up. So incredible that these moved through really populated areas today. Nobody was injured, so that's the good news. We did have a little bit of damage, a little bit of structural damage, but mostly just some power issues overall. So Cristobal still a threat, and it's going to bring all kinds of different hazards with it. And keep in mind, a lot of this is going to be far outside of where the center is going to be making landfall, far outside where we see that red cone of where that track is. Keep in mind that track is just where the center goes, and we've got lots of impacts out here into parts of Florida. So a couple of the key points that I just want you to know tonight is that conditions are expected to deteriorate along the Gulf Coast, and that will be progressive overnight and into tomorrow. Tropical storm warnings and storm surge watches and warnings for the northern Gulf Coast are in effect. Storm surge, flooding rains, strong winds, rip currents, and isolated tornadoes are all possible.
This storm a prime example that the impacts from tropical systems don't necessarily stay near the center. Well, we're going to talk about the latest conditions with Cristobal and where the impacts will be and why they're not necessarily right in here where our area of lowest pressure is. And we're seeing some thunderstorm action near that center now. It's sustaining at least north and south of the center. There's still some holes in there, but 50-mile-per-hour winds moving north at 12 and tropical storm warnings that are up across southeast Louisiana and then eastbound from there to extreme western portions of the Florida Panhandle. And yet, look at all this action going on that east side. That's where a lot of that tropical moisture is going to hang out as we go through the rest of the overnight and really through the life cycle of this storm. It's going to be an east-heavy storm. With that in mind, that's where the tropical moisture is going. That's where the spin is going. And the Storm Prediction Center is watching a large area from the Big Bend of Florida all the way back down to Fort Myers. That area is circled in red. About an 80% chance of a tornado watch at this point. So kind of a watch. We're not there yet, but pretty likely that within the next couple of hours, we're going to have a tornado watch be issued. We've already had some storms show signs of rotation and need tornado warnings. One of them came from off the coast and went to the east side of Sarasota, really fizzled out in the most recent couple of scans here, so that's why that tornado warning is no longer there. But this is a supercell, this was a supercell, so that potential is still reasonably high that we're going to see more tornadoes, or at least more tornado warnings through the nighttime hours.
Especially along the Treasure Coast. But again, these showers and thunderstorms not expected to really get going until late in the afternoon, after 4 p.m. Otherwise, right now, just a couple of spotty showers showers into West Palm Beach. We also have a shower just south of the Belle Glade area. Most of the rain right now is to the north. All of this associated with Tropical Storm right there, Cristobal. Not very well organized, Cristobal, but it is making a run towards New Orleans. You can already see lots of moisture starting to affect New Orleans, and it looks like it's going to make landfall as we head into later this afternoon and into tonight. Right now, winds at 50 miles an hour, moving towards the north at 12. It does make landfall late tonight, coming in as a tropical storm, and then once it is on land, that's when it starts to dissipate and it makes a run up towards Canada.
Good morning, I'm Ron Burke. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday, June 7th. We'll have your news in a moment, but first we start with first warning meteorologist Vanessa Vinette with your most accurate forecast. Hey, Vanessa.
Good morning, Ron, and good morning, South Florida. All eyes on Tropical Storm Cristobal this early morning as it makes its way to Louisiana, New Orleans area. But we're already feeling the effects of this system, mainly across the panhandle of Florida and the Big Bend of Florida as well, and including Mississippi and Louisiana. We have all those outer rain bands that will continue to push into Tampa, Orlando, and parts of Jacksonville, and we could see a couple of showers popping up, especially for the inland communities, and that's what we're seeing right now. We have heavy downpours just west of Lake Okeechobee and Belle Glade area, and a couple of isolated showers near Belle Glade, just south of that, and a couple of sprinkles across Fort Pierce and back into Vero Beach. So it is a very cloudy morning. We're going to keep it that way.
So cities of Alberta, take shelter now. There is a possible tornado associated with this thunderstorm moving northwestward. In fact, there may not actually even be any lightning. It may be a shower, a heavy rain shower associated with a tornado. That's the kind of weather we expect today across parts of the northern Gulf Coast, all, as I said, in association with this. The very close approach now of Tropical Storm Cristobal. Right now, we're dealing with basically the same storm that we were yesterday, except now that it's a little bit closer. The winds are about the same, 50 miles per hour in spots, not widespread for sure. Pressure is about the same, 994 millibars, and it continues on that very steady path. It's been a very well forecasted storm, I might add. Hurricane Center has done a really great job about doing this and forecasting it ahead. Moving north at 12 miles per hour, so if you just sort of extrapolate it out, well, we probably will have landfall by early or mid-afternoon. So not that long from now will the center cross the coast. But as I mentioned, as we've talked all along, it's not really about when and exactly where the center crosses the coast, because we're seeing bad weather now extend all the way from parts of Louisiana to Florida. Look at some of these winds here. Now, they're generally about 20 miles per hour sustained wind. This is about as strong as they're going to get. We'll have gusts 35, maybe 40 miles per hour at most. But that's about also what we expected. So this has been a well-behaved system, and the weather will continue to cause some problems today, for sure, with some heavy rain and also those strong gusty winds. And let's have a look at what we've got with the wind pattern around now Cristobal. Most of those strong winds, the ones that are near 50 miles per hour, are offshore and well east of the center. Those types of sustained winds are not likely to make it onshore, I don't think. Instead, we will see gusts here and there in the 40 to maybe 50 mile per hour range, with a scattered area of convection surrounding Cristobal. If you notice, there's the center, by the way, and there are arcs and little patches of shower activity and some thunderstorm activity. That is what we're going to be seeing today, a very sort of broken appearance overall in the rain and the wind, but we are still going to be dealing with that onshore wind and the coastal flooding associated with some water rises of 2 to 3 feet where there's that south-facing beaches. And we'll be dealing with the rain and the severe weather threat today. I'll talk more about that later. But let me get you through this forecast real quick through this evening. It does appear that by, say, mid-afternoon, Cristobal will be onshore, but the impacts will remain with that east and southeast wind continuing that water rise even after landfall. That is one thing to consider. And then from here on out, we'll talk about this later, Cristobal doesn't stop. It keeps going, Paul, and will bring some unsettling weather and some pretty nasty stuff all the way to the Great Lakes in the next couple of days. Paul.
Yeah, in fact, Dr. Purcell, we're seeing some of the heavier rain bands come through right now. We've seen on-again rain really since yesterday afternoon here in Dauphin Island, even up towards Mobile. We had some kind of waves of rain, and that's going to be the persistent thing today. I know yesterday we had some sunshine, some hazy sunshine, some dry weather. That's not going to happen today, as we're actually on the bay side of Dauphin Island. Again, Dauphin Island is a barrier island about, say, 30 miles due south of the city of Mobile here in coastal Alabama. Alabama. So the ocean, the Gulf of Mexico is kind of right behind me here. We had a location right on the beach, but because of the onslaught of the waves, high tide is coming in this morning after 11 o'clock. So we're seeing overwash on some of the roads there. In fact, it was too dangerous to continue to that location, so we kind of fell back on the bay side, where it's definitely safer. We can have our vehicles higher, and yeah, we have, you see the water here. It's very close to the top of the deck here. We don't expect a huge amount of storm surge here, but with the wind driving the waves and the storm surge, we're going to have definitely some low spots fill up with water, so flooding is a big concern. And the rain coming down as well. We had some localized flooding yesterday, mainly from the rainfall that would come through, and when these tropical bands come through, they can dump a lot of rain in a short amount of time. Also, what happened yesterday, we had a couple of water spouts here on Dolphin Island. One, we had video of one actually coming on shore, so perhaps that was our first tornado, but we already know we've had several tornado warnings this morning. Even tornadoes yesterday as far away as the Orlando area in Florida. So this is a huge circulation, bringing not only the risk for tornadoes, as well as this heavy driving rain, and also look for some gusty winds in those heavier rain bands, as well as closer to the center, which again will probably make landfall close to 200 miles to the west of us here in Dolphin Island, but we're still going to be in the midst of this for the rest of the day as it makes landfall later on today. And even as it moves inland, we're still going to have the onslaughts of the waves, the rain, and even the wind as we head into later on tonight and even into your Monday before things clear up later in the week.
And once again, we all thank you for the efforts that you're providing to us during these difficult times. Much appreciated. We now have some new information coming in from the National Hurricane Center. The new advisory is just in, and we are basically maintaining the same strength at 50 miles per hour, the same pressure, 994, and the same motion north at 12 miles per hour. So nothing has changed in the last 6 hours since the last advisory, and really, nothing much has changed since yesterday. So this storm is going to likely come on board about the way it is right now, early this afternoon, in a few hours' time, but we will be dealing with all the threats to continuing of rain, maybe severe weather as well with a tornado threat and some coastal flooding with storm surge. So all that's going on. But right now I'm going to send it over to Reynolds, who's got some new video into the Weather Channel looking at some of the damage from some of the tornadoes on the periphery of Cristobal. Reynolds.
Absolutely. We make our way to Central Florida, right in Orlando, where we have some damage. We have anywhere from 30 to 50 people displaced, a lot of damage in terms of structural, but there's a good silver lining to it. That is, at this point, no loss of life, and that is certainly the true victory out of this. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to landfalling tropical systems, you can and often have tornadic activity that can be spawned by these bands as they make their way onshore. Now, that's the bad news. Good news is that they don't last very long, and they're usually fairly weak, but they can cause damage. Now, here's the danger with it. When they do come onshore, they often can be rain-wrapped, very, very difficult to see. So it's not like some of the large tornadoes that you'll see out in the Central Plains that can form into miles of open prairie where you can see them easily. These hidden monsters, so you got to watch out for them, no question. One thing that we are not seeing or feeling right now happens to be rain. It's relatively, well, for the moment, dry, but we've got pretty much a pattern that is setting up, which is typical for these landfalling tropical systems. You'll have one band that will come in. The wind will pick up, the rain will follow. Then you'll have a bit of a break in the action. Then another one comes in. You have this repetitive, this skipping nature that'll happen time and again. And during that point, the water tends to stack up, the ground saturated, and sure enough, you have the flooding. Now, let's flood our way right back to Dr. Greg Postel. Certainly a busy time so far this morning, and busier times ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, it doesn't end, does it?
And that's a good point about, stranded. We do not. That's Greg. That's exactly what I was worried about. That we get water on the roadways, and you think it's just a little rainstorm, but you get that much water, you have the challenging factors like we have with the way the drainage happens, and the water piles up and your car can't get through. And so that's going to be a challenge even into tomorrow when the system, after it makes landfall, we will still be in heavy rainfall.
Jan, you're exactly right. And with this system, it's not really the wind. That's not an issue. It's the water, the rain, and the surge. So let's have a look at what we've got, some of the current conditions along the northern Gulf Coast. Winds, again, not much of an issue, 20 to 30 miles per hour, as Jan was talking about. Maybe a couple places a little bit higher than that, but not really much higher. There's the center of circulation probably right about there in this animation. It's kind of moving around in a sort of a counterclockwise way because it's a larger area of low pressure. It's doing that. It's kind of circulating around like that. And so this mini area of low pressure, which may indeed maybe the center, is probably going to come on board later on today, and actually that would be the landfall. But look at what's going on over here. There's some angry-looking clouds kind of moving northward, getting very close to the northern Gulf Coast as this next rain band moves in. And you can see that, and there it is. There's about ready to make it on shore to Gulf shores. Right there, Dauphin Island, just offshore. It must be getting pretty dark if you look to the south in both of those locations, with gusty winds and a tornado risk coming on board with those showers.
Did that. You can see how it wraps around the underside, and it actually gets right into the center of the circulation. When you've got dry air in place like that, you're not going to get thunderstorms developing all around the center, and that's what you need to get a tropical system to intensify. You can actually see the center is exposed. There's a low-level center right in there. There have been a number of little swirls within the larger circulation, and that probably is where the lowest pressure is, right there. So it could be that as that cycles up and comes towards the coast, that could be the point of landfall officially, and that might be a few hours yet before that occurs. It's sort of academic at this point because it's such a large, sprawling system. You've got this big band of rain coming in, certainly gusty winds along with that, a tornado threat, and heavy rain into northern Florida as well. Heavy rain is going to be one of the big threats going forward in southern Mississippi and southeast Louisiana. So we see these lines of showers coming through in Mississippi and Alabama. Tornado watch going until 5 o'clock this afternoon. There's also an ongoing surge threat, surge up to nearly 5 feet. Bay Waveland Yacht Club in southern Mississippi. That's because of that concave nature of the coastline right there. It really helps to pile the water up. And there's an ongoing storm surge warning for southern Mississippi as well as into southeastern parts of Louisiana. So there are ongoing threats here. And, you know, Tevin, as we've been saying all along, even though this is not the strongest of storms, it is certainly a very large storm. And for that reason, the impact's going on for a long, long period of time. So it's going to be quite a while before things improve where you are.
Yeah, Carl, this storm very atypical and sort of throwing us for a curveball in terms of where some of the strongest impacts are, not necessarily located at the center, but far removed and towards the east. We want to bring in the director of the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham, right now to talk to us about the latest advisory that they just issued and where we potentially go from here. And Ken, I'm interested, if we have you right now, I'm interested in that forward speed and how we got down to 5 miles an hour. I mean, that's essentially a crawl. Do we anticipate getting any slower than that?
Yeah, so far, looking at that 5 mile an hour movement, I mean, just as you were all saying, that dry air gets in the center, it kind of exposes that entire center, and then even small little vortices start rotating around it. So you get this little wobbling effect that takes place. So slowing down to 5 miles an hour, and with time, eventually starting to speed up. So it might slow down the landfall part of it, but the big takeaway is what you're all covering, and so important. Look how big. I mean, I look back at this whole satellite image here. It stretches across most of the Gulf of Mexico. Rain, storm surge, still got all those impacts. So really trying to look away from that center and see all the dangers of those impacts associated with this storm.
And can we sort of go back to the birth of this storm? And essentially, it got its DNA from the eastern Pacific. It dropped a lot of rainfall throughout portions of Mexico and Guatemala, and then it sort of was reborn, if you will, into the Gulf of Mexico. How interesting and how atypical is it for a storm to do such a thing like that?
Yeah, that doesn't happen too often. So those were the origins. We're bringing incredible rainfall. I saw some of the rainfall totals in areas of Central America. Some areas getting 30 to 40 inches of rain, but Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, we've been coordinating with those countries so much about some of this rainfall and the movement. So yeah, pretty unusual. But the story of this one it's just a large storm, and the story has been about the rainfall and the storm surge, and that continues, not just in Central America, but it's still the topic that we continue today.
And Director Graham, I know you're well versed in tropical meteorology, but for someone who isn't perhaps in the Midwest and in the northern plains as they're anticipating to see some of the remnants of this storm, what would you advise them, especially with the severe weather threat and the flash flood threat as well?
Yeah, definitely. I always had that severe weather threat. And it's interesting with these systems, on the right front quadrant of a tropical system, that's where you get most of your tornadoes. 90% of your tornadoes occur right there. So in those rain bands, we'll have to watch. But look at the tropical moisture that's going to move northward. With time, by Monday evening, we're in Arkansas, and then Tuesday morning, Missouri, even getting into Wisconsin with time. So all this moisture is going to continue to stream northward. So my advice is, we start interacting with different fronts. You could still get those tropical rains well to the north. So those tropical systems, it's not just along the coast, it's well inland. So please pay attention to those forecasts along rivers, the flash flooding. It's not just down here on the coast, but you can start seeing some of those big impacts well to the north with time over the next, we start looking at the next 2 or 3 days.
All right, Director Graham, we certainly appreciate you for your time. We know it will likely be a very busy season. I mean, we're barely a week into hurricane season, and here we are with impending landfall across portions of Louisiana. Director Graham, thanks again for your time.
One of those in effect for Baker, Bradford, and Union counties. That is going until 4:45. This cell moving northeast at 10 miles per hour. You can see the little appendage on the southwest side there. That is southwest of Lake Butler. So not moving real fast, but it looks like it's coming right towards Lake Butler. So you need to get to your safe place right now. Moving at 10 miles per hour. That's going to be coming in about 4:30 or so in Lake Butler. So please get to your safe place right now as that is moving up and along that Route 121 there. Also to the north, an ongoing warning. This one for Columbia County. And in the velocity data here, this does appear to be sort of weakening. You can see how it's sort of elongated right now. But also notice there's rotation here, a little bit right there, a little bit right there. So that just gives you an idea of what's going on in the atmosphere right now. There's a lot of low-level wind shear, and that's why we've seen a number of tornado warnings popping out within the last hour. Marion County under warning here. This is northeast of Leesburg. Largely rural areas are going to be affected. Got a little bit of rotation showing up northwest of Umatilla, and that's going to be moving to the northeast into largely rural areas near the intersection of Route 40 and also Route 19. But a lot going on here just within the last hour, as I mentioned, so please be on your toes there in north central Florida. So here's the latest on the storm. It is a 50-mile-per-hour storm. It's moving north at 5 miles per hour. Never really did get its act together. We had been watching this exceptionally dry continental air on the west side of the circulation. That wrapped in underneath and actually right into the center of the circulation, so it was never really able to wrap tall thunderstorms, deep convection, as we say, about that center, and without that, you don't see a lot of intensification. That on top of the fact that the storm has just been a very, very large storm, and large storms tend to ramp up very slowly. But it does have a large wind field. That's the area of strong winds there, 30-plus mile-per-hour wind, and you can see there's a lot of that that is yet to come in, and for that reason, this is going to be a long-duration event. Winds now gusting up and over 45 miles per hour along the coast. That'll continue through tonight and through tomorrow morning, and then will gradually begin to wane in the afternoon along the northern Gulf Coast. But it's going to be quite a while because it's going to take some time for all of that to move in. And we're now beginning to see some of the stronger winds affecting these coastal areas. And when you look at this long loop here, you can see that there's this larger circulation. There was a broader circulation in here, but within that, there was that little circulation, that little spin that looks like it may have ended up becoming the center of circulation. That actually moved to the south for a little while, right in there, and then kind of stalled out for a time, and now is being sort of pulled around very quickly to the north, very much like carnival ride within a larger circulation. So the question is that actually the center of circulation? Are they considering that the center of circulation? If so, then it might be very close to making a landfall, and we'll see about that. But, it really is, as Mike Seidel has been saying, really immaterial because all of the weather has been well away from the center, unlike a purely tropical cyclone in which the winds get stronger and stronger towards the middle, towards the eye wall of the storm. In a storm that has got some non-tropical characteristics, as this one certainly does, a lot of the weather is displaced from that center, and you can see that very clearly in this case. We're not seeing very strong wind right about that tight little core, which is sitting in here. Rather, all the weather is out to the east here. There's this huge area of strong wind, and that is slowly going to come up and across the northern Gulf Coast. And because the storm is moving slowly, that's going to make it last for a long time. It's going to be a long duration event with winds gusting 30, 35, 40 miles per hour through the night tonight into the morning tomorrow, finally beginning to taper off later in the day tomorrow. And you can see that strong wind now coming up and affecting parts of the coast there in Mississippi and also in Alabama. The wind not so strong as it comes across the land and back out into the open water. Certainly friction has a lot to do with that. But where this water is coming, where the wind rather is coming right off the water and into the coast, that's where we're getting gusts to tropical storm force there in Biloxi. Winds now gusting to 47 miles per hour in Gulfport and 33 TD3 in Mobile, and this is going to continue all night long. Much more coming up.
Storm Cristobal. Let's get right to it with some breaking news. The new advisory is in on this tropical storm. So for that, we're going to Storm Tracker Jim Cantori with a look at this. And as you were ingesting this new advisory from the National Hurricane Center, Jim, does anything stand out to you?
Yeah, we're about to get a landfall. That's what stands out to me. We're very close to a landfall with this. We can see it on satellite. You can't see it so much on radar because the center is really void of precipitation. But we can certainly tell by the fact that you have coastline 65 miles south of New Orleans. That's pretty much right there between land and sea. We're just about to get it. Again, all along we've been telling you about the lopsided nature of this, how the dry air has pretty much gotten entrained. It's really, for all intents and purposes, a subtropical storm. That'll be something you can read about in Post if the Hurricane Center decides that that's the way they're going to go with it. But for everything that we're seeing, certainly wind field wise and how this has behaved, that's exactly what we've got. But looking at the visible imagery, you kind of look from here, it looks like, well, maybe we got it on shore. But then you get into the center of this, which has been broad. The Hurricane Center's been discussing this, okay? But we've had several little swirls that have made their way around that. Now, the most recent one is right here. All right, look at that, coming right up toward Pilot Town in Venice, which is this extreme southern point. And if you kind of look at everything, you don't really see any more swirls left. So you kind of wonder, and the fact that that's about 65 miles south, east of New Orleans, you wonder if that's the center. And, you know, we'll find out, obviously. It's the Hurricane Center's call if this is just actually cross land, and we'll hear about it from them. But a lot of tentacles extending far to the east of all this. Some of the main action today has certainly been over Florida with the active weather there. We've had almost a foot of rain up around Interstate 10, so we'll talk about that. But here's what you can see here. This is basically the high-resolution winds. If you take all the data out there that we have for you, between buoys, between what's going on with the hurricane hunters, between what they see, this is the new wind field that you can see. And the center being here, the storm winds being strongest out here basically is the clue that we have a subtropical storm here. Okay, there's not a lot of wind around that center. As a matter of fact, it's going to be eerily odd that within the vicinity of that center, or what would be obviously in a hurricane and eye wall, you should have the strongest winds. But we don't have that. We have it all off to the east. You're getting that in Gulfport. You're getting that in Biloxi. We've already seen tropical storm winds on the coastline. Certainly if you're down Dauphin Island, you've been watching the wind blow sideways down there as well. And some of these stronger, heavier rains have also moved in to the I-10 corridor as well. So that's with the first band. So not surprising, tropical storm warnings still posted here. They may be for a while because you saw how long that wind field extended out over the water, right? So even though the center may be coming on shore, you still have to deal with that wind field, which extends really very far, maybe over 100 miles off the coast. So dry air is kind of the key to this whole west side. That's why Houston, you may get a little light shower from the northwest, and that's about it. But a lot of this action's been honing in on north central Florida. We have the best low-level change in wind direction. In other words, surface to 5,000 feet, you're almost at 90 degrees and through here. I mean, that's not perfect, but you see these little discrete supercells, even on the radar this morning. We'll watch and see what happens with this as it moves on shore, because again, this is basically, tornado-warned storms from the sheer environment versus the instability in through here. Because it's been cloudy and rainy all day, and holy smoke has it rained. I want to read you some of these rainfall totals. Jasper, Florida, 833. Hopewell, Florida, 1015. Another area around Hopewell, 11.3, so almost a foot of rain in through here. This is a storm we've been watching for a while now. It did produce some damage down there near Lake City, and now it has come up just to the northeast of Lake Butler. There is a tornado warning on it. You can see the very small couplet right in through here that Shane's zooming in on for us. And again, these are going to be transient. This isn't going to be something we're going to watch all afternoon here like a big supercell out in the Midwest, but it's going to be something that's going to kind of ebb and flow here a little bit. And if you live in Rayford, this thing is strong enough, obviously, from a couplet standpoint to impact you. Shane, let's see if we have any kind of a TDS, a tornado debris signature there on the correlation coefficient. So there's a little bit of a dropout, okay, and what that shows us is we may have some type of debris blowing around in there. And we know one thing, it's been very, very wet there. So you're getting a lot of tree damage, a lot of trees blown over as a result of this. But signature-wise, from what we see with TDS and TDS, which is the tornado debris signature I showed you, the light green color, that's where we do think certainly that we've got a chance that we have a tornado on the ground very, very close close to that city.
Storm expected to make landfall somewhere in Louisiana tonight.
Meteorologist Luke Doris has a look at that and a quick check on our forecast locally, Luke.
About to have our second landfall from a tropical storm somewhere in the U.S. By later on tonight. Remember, we had Bertha that made landfall in South Carolina. The center of circulation right around there, so just off the southeast coast of Louisiana, and producing some gusty, showers. We've got winds gusting to around 50 miles per hour in Gulfport, Mississippi, but that's kind of spotty. Not a terribly destructive windstorm. The main concern here is going to be flash flooding in these bands that come up. It's a slow lumbering storm. And storm surge. In fact, even though this isn't all that powerful of a windstorm, look at the video coming out of Louisiana. This is an area of the country that's especially vulnerable to storm surge, very low lying. And even with winds, it's a tropical storm force, you can still get a lot of piling up of water if the storm is large enough. And this is a fairly broad system. So that's pushing all that water up into Louisiana, into Mississippi, into Alabama, and they are certainly seeing storm surge effects there. Okay, let's talk about the rest of the life of what is Tropical Storm Cristobal, likely to weaken to a tropical depression by tomorrow, and then it runs northward, dragging a lot of rain. Flooding continues all the way through Arkansas and even Missouri, and then it merges with a land-based storm and creates a lot of wind over the Great Lakes. Back here in Florida, some of the worst of the weather again. Remember, we had tornadoes yesterday in Orlando, tornado warning just southwest of Jacksonville. At home, haven't had that much today. You see this line that's about 50 miles to our east that could have easily been over the top of us, but it stayed further away. So our rain has been spotty. It will remain spotty through the rest of this evening. We'll chat more about your weather in the week ahead when I'm back in just a few minutes. Alex and Andrew.
Well, right now on the Weather Channel, tracking Tropical Storm Cristobal. We want to get a update now from the National Hurricane Center. Ken Graham, the director of the National Hurricane Center, kind enough to join us via Skype, along with storm tracker Jim Cantori. And Mr. Graham, as we know, the storm, no storms are alike, right? They can have some similarities, but each one is unique in its own way. And the forecast is as good as it is, as good as it can be. So far, the way things have been playing out, have there been any surprises so far?
Yeah, you're right. Most of these storms are so different. We never compare seasons. We never compare storms. Here's one that's different as well. So the track's pretty close to perfect. But what's interesting in this situation is the whole center fairly exposed. I mean, you can see this entire center exposed with these little swirls. So when the swirl gets to the north part of the actual low, it'll speed the system up. When it gets on the the western half and the bottom, and actually slow the system down. So that's always one of these very interesting factors with these storms.
Ken, I'm going to play off of what Chris was talking about, the fact that you're kind of honing in on that center, because you guys essentially are going to have to call landfall on this at some point. It's close, but how? What are you guys looking at for landfall? Can we? I mean, maybe you could zoom in on that visible and give us a few more specifics.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a conversation, Jim, that we just had here in operations. And really what we're doing is looking at the mean center. So we're taking that entire exposed area there and trying to find out, okay, where's the mean? Where's the middle of that? Not looking at each individual swirl, because the entire low pressure system is really this open area there. And that's what we're doing. So we're going to look at that mean center. It's close. I think we're within the hour for landfall. But these little swirls, we saw that slow down to that 5 miles an hour, Jim. And that's when this swirls down on the bottom side, slowing it down. Watch what happens in the next couple hours as that swirl gets to the the northern part of it. It'll help pull it forward, up to 7 miles an hour now, and maybe even speed up more.
And as we look at that center coming on shore and the official landfall happening, is this a situation we don't want to get too caught up with landfall, because we're seeing tornado warnings, flooding happening in Florida? This is a big, massive system here. What's the overall message just going through the next couple of hours?
Yeah, the next couple of hours, I mean, if you look at how large this system is, we've seen severe weather in Florida. I mean, switching over to the radar, you can just see all the rainfall. I mean, in Florida, right through Alabama, Mississippi, it's the heavy rain. It's just a dangerous rain. And we also have, of course, the storm surge. Those tide values have come up, and we saw that storm surge, very dangerous storm surge. We're coming off of that high tide, but in some areas, depending on your location, even if we make landfall, some areas see a delay in some of that high water. So we still have to pay attention to those tides and that storm surge, even over the next 24 hours.
Yeah, and Ken is exactly right. I mean, if you look at the wind field from this thing that extends all the way out into the Atlantic for a couple more 100 miles at least, even though we're out of the high tide, we're still going to hold that water up, aren't we? Because the wind is just as strong offshore for several hundred miles.
That's exactly what happens. We've seen that so many different times. You get that initial push, the winds trap the water in here. We start looking at the Rigolets. We start looking at Plaquemines Parish, St. Bernard Parish, and the Mississippi coast. But with time, as we move north, all of a sudden you switch the winds. Other places, even west of the river, could see some of those water levels start coming up even well after the landfall.
And Ken, as we track this storm, as you mentioned, it's going north. At what point will the National Hurricane Center hand off the storm to the local offices as it continues to go way far north into the United States?
Yeah, we're going to be watching it real close, and the Weather Prediction Center eventually takes that. And I'm glad you mentioned it because it's something that we're talking about. I mean, you look at this. I mean, this is an area of concern. Look at the areas that could get the potential of that flash flooding, the high risk, the moderate risk, stretching into Arkansas. Look with time. Tropical moisture is, Jim, you and I we've all talked about it, just so efficient. With time, some of this moisture getting up into Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, you start interacting with any frontal boundaries up there, you can get some intense rainfall and even some wind. So it's a concern not just on the coast, but well inland over the next several days.
Ken Graham, the director of the National Hurricane Center, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
we do appreciate that. And in order for areas outside of the levee system in Orleans Parish, including Venetian Isles, Lake Catherine, and Irish Bayou. So I want to go back right now to Storm Tracker Jim Cantore, because even with landfall, it's going to be a long ways to go before we're in the clear, because part of it's just such a big storm. And then the rain is always a big threat with any tropical entity, named or not. Oh, and you mentioned this, we're looking at a nowcasting kind of situation.
Right, so now you watch areas like Mississippi where we have the flood warning out. On I-10, it seems like I-10's getting picked on tonight, both in Mississippi and also into Florida. We've had a foot of rain in Madison County there. The eastbound lanes at, I think, mile marker 262 are closed there for about 11 miles. So that's not a good situation. Plus, you're not really seeing this taper down because it is, what we call a subtropical storm versus just purely tropical. The center, and Mike Seidel's been pointing this out for the last 2 hours, he's in literally no wind. So he's a part of that broad center that made landfall as of 5 o'clock tonight. And in case you're just joining us, again, Cristobal making landfall at about 5 o'clock, just east of Grand Island. All right. Was it Buras? Was it, that area? I don't know. But east of Grand Island is what we're getting in terms of official landfall point. Winds were at 50, pressure's 992. And this 992 pressure is interesting because there's no reason why that's going to just go away or fill quickly. So we've already set a pressure record in June for New Orleans at 995 millibars. Do we tick that a little bit lower than that? It's possible. So look at the infrared when you don't have the radar. We have them both, but I just want to show you. So look at the enhancement going on there. That's deep convection. That's deep tropical thunderstorms going on there. Same thing here over in Madison and Lake counties. And we even had a severe weather risk there earlier on. So we'll see what happens with these tentacles that still sit offshore, albeit they're going to continue to rotate onto the northwest. So if you're in Arkansas watching us, if you're in Missouri, Illinois, all this is coming your way. Granted, it is a heavy rain threat and even a little bit of a wind threat, because what's going to happen with this storm is interesting in its own right. So again, we look at the broad center. This was the one main swirl which came in with this. So it's kind of a fool's center, if you will. So if you look at that, you think, well, that's got to be the center, right? No, well, the center was broader than that, and east of Grand Island would have made the landfall point here as of 5 o'clock. So this is just one of those little vortices that's spinning around. We'll see what that does, but there's been so much dry air on the southern flank of this. Hopefully that'll save New Orleans from getting any of this flooding. But the areas to the north of that are right in the enhancement. So Pensacola, you've got rain, maybe a little heavier rain coming up. And the other thing is, too, is look at where the wind is, Chris, in position of landfall. It's right here. So all that wind is just pushing that water inland. We've seen flooding in Waveland, past Christian, Gulfport, Biloxi. It's going to keep that water high probably through tomorrow.
Yeah, and then as tomorrow also, as you're back on in the morning talking about the threat going north, we could be waking up with some serious flood issues.
Yeah, we could. That's going to be a big concern tonight.
How about a live look at Waveland, Mississippi? Still some waves crashing over the break wall there. We'll have some water over the roads, splashing over the roads. There have been portions of Highway 90 that have been water covered today, but the water's going to back off gradually for us now as the center of circulation comes ashore here. The winds will back off a little bit. The onshore flow won't be nearly as prevalent as it has been throughout the day. One thing that will continue, though, is the heavy rain. At times, it was rough today. combined with some storm surge, brought some significant flooding to some areas. Now, in New Orleans, check this out. As the marker there says, maybe about 2 feet or so. Some low-lying areas did fill up with some water, some vulnerable areas. Some coastline areas, 5 to 6 feet of surge today. And now this area, Pontchartrain, several inches of water covering the roads here, and people kind of wading through it. We'd urge you not to do that. You know, sometimes there's some stuff in there that you want to mess with. Chemicals and gasoline and oil, and not to mention some snakes. And that can be alarming when you run into one. How about some new video of a water spout off the coast of Gulf Shores, Alabama? Several tornadoes spawned as a result of Cristobal here. That's one right there. And look how rough the ocean is, too. The Gulf of Mexico was really rough today. Double red flags out there, and then a tornado over the water, just like that. Several reports of tornadoes today, and that the tornadoes extended over into the peninsula of Florida, and then has spiraled near the center as well. All right, let's update you on what we have right now with the Tropical Storm Cristobal. We've gotten the newest advisory in, so let's bring you the stats here. Winds have come down just a hair here. Previous advisory, they were 50. They now sit at 45. Moving north-northwest at 10. It's picked up a little bit of forward speed here, was previously at 7. Pressure hasn't changed at all. Location now 20 miles north-northwest of New Orleans, Louisiana. So center of circulation is almost right on top of where our Chris Bruin is tonight. We'll check back with him in just a second here, but you can see we still got some convection, especially on the east side and the north side of Cristobal right now. But again, with the newest advisory, the changes are this: winds are down just a little bit, forward speed has picked up just a little bit. So let's bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, to dive down into the details of this. Give us, some of the takeaways for tonight and maybe tomorrow morning when people wake up, Dr. Knabb. What do you anticipate?
Well, I think it's still going to be a long night along the Gulf Coast because this is such a large system. It's still going to be gusty well into tomorrow. It's still going to be wet on the roads, and there's still the flood risk. So I would just stay put indoors along the Gulf Coast. But that's just the coastal areas. It's going to continue to go downhill in inland areas. If you're in a place like Jackson, Mississippi, it's already been gusting above 40 miles an hour. It's only going to get worse with the wind and the rain. And then in places like Arkansas, it's going to go downhill. So in many places, this is just beginning, okay? Now, why is this still a tropical storm? Why are all the watches and warnings still up along the coast? Because this is such a large system that you still have a good portion of the circulation that's out over water. And that's where the maximum sustained winds of 45 miles an hour are occurring. Pressure is still very low. It's still a very large system. So it's, again, landfall of the center of circulation that happened several hours ago is nowhere near being the end of things when you've got this large of a system. Here's the new track and intensity forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Again, by this time tomorrow, it's going to be an inland tropical depression, but we're still going to have a lot of gusty winds that could gust above 40 or 50 miles an hour. And again, this is just the cone that represents where the center of circulation is probably going to go. But the impacts will extend well outside the cone. For example, tomorrow, Mississippi is going to have a risk of tornadoes, flooding rains, strong gusty winds, could have power outages. So, don't look at this cone and think in the inland portions of central and northern Mississippi or in Memphis, Tennessee, that this is not your problem. Again, it will continue to be a very right-loaded system. And then these numbers increasing 35, 40 miles an hour are when it gets injected with some non-tropical energy, and the maximum sustained winds could strengthen a bit again, and then the gusts will be even stronger than that. So that's digesting the track and intensity forecast. The tropical storm warning has not changed one bit. Still includes Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Gulfport, Mobile, Pensacola, Destin, Fort Walton. And you can see how we've still got a very large wind field yet to come on shore. And as long as you're getting the winds off the Gulf of Mexico, they're going to be pretty potent, unobstructed. Still gusting to 33 at Biloxi, 29 on Grand Island. Now look how you're starting to get a southwesterly wind there, a northerly wind at Baton Rouge, southerly wind in Biloxi. So that's why New Orleans, you're kind of in the middle of this whole thing. That's why your winds are so weak. I might be thinking, what storm? Well, all the winds are away from New Orleans right now. Look at this, gusting to 46 at Mobile, 44 at Pensacola. So again, the center of circulation information is not the center of action right now. Storm surge warning still in effect. We still have life-threatening storm surge values above 3 feet there at Waveland and Bay St. Louis, and Shell Beach is still up. You still have an onshore push. Now, we're in low tide, but as we go overnight and into late tomorrow morning, we're going to head toward another high tide. So it's going to take until tomorrow night before the onshore push and the tide all come down. This hasn't changed. Flash flood watch is still in effect. There's still every expectation that this moisture is coming inland, and all these flash flood warnings along the coast, this is a preview of what is going to happen inland in Mississippi. Heads up Jackson, heads up Little Rock, heads up Memphis, Tennessee. You might be the next areas to go under flash flood warnings tomorrow.
Your storm station monitoring Tropical Storm Cristobal as the system lingers after making landfall in Louisiana.
A surge of concern washing over people along the Gulf Coast. Dangerous storm surges can reach up to 5 feet. Forecasters predict the storm could dump as much of a foot of rain.
That's right. Plus, the dangerous wind speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. Reporter Whitney Wild is live in New Orleans now, where some residents were urged to evacuate due to a flood of trouble. Whitney.
There's really been a mix of evacuation orders. In some cases, they were mandatory. In other cases, they were voluntary. What we're seeing now, though, since we last spoke, was the wind picking up, the rain picking up, the temperature dropping here in New Orleans. And what we know now is that the storm is beginning to weaken. The storm now has wind gusts of around 45 miles per hour, although that is still stretching more than 200 miles out of the center of the storm, impacting states from Louisiana to Florida.
Tropical Storm Cristobal making landfall in Louisiana Sunday, bringing wind and rain to states along the Gulf Coast. The city of New Orleans posting an informational video on social media asking residents to shelter in place ahead of its first major storm of the season.
But we just want to make sure that everybody continues to stay safe, continues to shelter in place, and continues to practice safe hygiene and masking while you're at home, because we are in the midst of COVID as well.
Tropical storm warnings are posted for much of the Louisiana coastline, Mississippi, Alabama, and portions of the Florida Panhandle. At the moment, flooding is the biggest concern.
As you can see, the water has come over the road and connected to the bayou.
We've seen some rain bands coming through, and fortunately, we'll see a rain band come through, and it'll give us a little break so those drainage pumps can catch up.
Neighboring states to the east, including Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and even the Carolinas, will each pick up several inches of rain in a short period of time, which could trigger flash flooding.
Obviously, as you can see, very dangerous for people to be driving.
The storm will continue to progress north into Iowa and Wisconsin, a region that rarely sees tropical storms in its backyard.
Within this storm, there are gusts of around 50 miles per hour. Meteorologists say do not get too comfortable even if there is a lull in the storm, because the fear is that there's more rain on the way. Storm surge continues to be a big concern. Meteorologists worried that the storm surge could reach up to 5 feet in some of these coastal areas. I'm Whitney Wild in New Orleans, 7 News Night Team.
And Storm Station team coverage continues now with meteorologist Brent Cameron live in the Weather Center with where the storm could be heading. Brent?
And the new advisory coming in just a few moments ago. Here's an overall broad view of this big system known as Cristobal. And there you see the big spin of rain across southeastern Louisiana. Where the system made landfall, that was at around 5 o'clock Central Time near Grand Isle. Wind speeds at that point at landfall around 50 miles per hour. Wind speeds since along the Gulf Coast, New Orleans to Mobile, Pensacola, not all that impressive, but here is the official advisory now just in from the National Hurricane Center. Winds of 45 and still moving off to the north and northwest. 10 miles per hour, a little faster in forward speed. That is good news. The faster it moves out, the lower the rain progress, perhaps in many areas. This is the official forecast cone as the system lifts almost directly north, all the way up with remnants getting into the Great Lakes vicinity as the week continues. And all week, this is going to mean lots of rain in its path, and in its wake, we could see some flooding concerns. Here's a quick check check on Florida and the tropical moisture that does continue to stream across the area. Our rain chances remain around typical for this time of the year, 30 to 40% as we start the work week. Notice a little increase, a slight bump on Wednesday, and then those rain chances come down after that. We'll see why that's going to be the case with your entire forecast in a few minutes.
Truly, Florida has been a state that's taken a beating. I'm sure a lot of people surprised here, Dr. Nab, of this looks worse in Pensacola than it did where Mike Seidel was, where basically the center of circulation made landfall. What do you make of all this and the lesson to be learned about how this particular tropical storm played out?
Yeah, and Micah, in some ways, this reminds me of past June tropical storms in the Gulf of Mexico, like Debbie in 2012. Centered over the Gulf, and the center of action, all the flooding and the tornadoes were over the Florida Peninsula. And when it's large and lopsided, the weather is going to be extending and maybe primarily happening far away from the center of circulation. And that's still the case for portions of the Florida Panhandle right now.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that, Dr. Nev. Why don't you run through it for our folks tonight that are watching late night for us tonight and give them an update on what's happening?
Sure, yeah, the center of circulation generally kind of going over the New Orleans and Lake Pontchartrain area a little while ago. Now New Orleans kind of on the south side of the center of circulation, getting west winds gusting to about 36 miles an hour recently. Look at Baton Rouge, northerly winds gusting to 38. Mobile, southerly winds gusting to 35. But in between, there's very weak winds. But the primary bands are way out here. You know, tens to hundreds of miles east of the center of circulation. Hattiesburg and Jackson, Mississippi getting pretty gusty and heavy rains right now. But look at these bands right out here. And that's where we got the flash flood warnings, and it's where we've got some potent bands that have a little bit of swirl in them. So if you look south of the Panhandle coast, so here's Mexico Beach and Panama City Beach, look south of there, we've got a special marine warning in effect because we've had a couple of these swirls, little areas of spin that we can see on the radar in the showers, in the bands, far flung from the center, that fully capable of producing water spouts, fully capable of producing gusts of tropical storm force. And this last little swirl, hopefully it will continue to weaken as it moves toward the Panama City Beach area. And also, hopefully, there aren't any boats out there. This is a really bad time with high waves, lightning, water spouts coming and going very, very quickly.
By conditions, no precipitation falling from those clouds. Where we are seeing plenty of precipitation is over the Gulf Coast states. Let's talk about Cristobal. First 10 minutes of the newscast, we promise you that tropical weather update. And this system has become a tropical depression after making landfall yesterday and doing major damage. Life-threatening storm surge, flooding, flash flooding, anywhere from Louisiana, Mississippi to Alabama. As the system heads northward, once again, it was a very lopsided system. All the precipitation is over the northern half of Louisiana into Arkansas and Missouri. As of 5 a.m., winds at 35 miles per hour, moving north-northwest at 10. National Hurricane Center also eyeing a non-tropical low just east of Bermuda with a 10% chance of development in the next 5 days.
And then, of course, advance north into the Midwest and keep its, impacts going. No question about that. Parts of Mississippi seeing almost 7 inches of rain yesterday, with Gulfport setting a new daily record with over 6 inches there. But the big winner was the eastern side of the storm, well away from the center. Listen to this. Sewanee Springs, Florida, over 13 inches of rain. Whew, that's a lot. So let's go back and talk about this. If you remember last week when we were discussing what we thought Cristobal would do, we thought it would make a turn down over the Gulf. Well, yesterday it made its landfall and then turned, but not before setting a new June low pressure record in New Orleans at 993 millibars. So they broke it at 995 and went down to 994 and 93. There's the heavier rain over Madison and Sewanee counties. Parts of I-10 was closed yesterday evening for several hours, eastbound lanes, as a result of this heavy rain. And there you see Sewanee Springs coming in with over 13 inches of rain. So yesterday, here's the records. Gulfport 691, Mobile, Alabama 556. So you look at the days in June, and we've certainly had tropical systems and heavy downpours before, but these are, top 10 days in terms of rainfall. And look at Jacksonville, 4.40 in 24 hours. That's the most since 26 June in 2012 with Tropical Storm Debbie. Jacksonville also had a dew point yesterday of 81 degrees, which set a record. Whew. for a highest dew point in June.
There was another water spout spotted near Perdido Key, Florida. That one did come ashore, but didn't cause any damage or injuries. So again, a lot of spin in the atmosphere, and we're still seeing that now. I think that's going to be a trend later on this afternoon as we'll see the tornado potential ramping up. Give it another couple hours, and I'm pretty confident we'll see at least a couple of tornado warnings today. Because of this band in particular, there's just enough heating going on out ahead of it. You see how much clearing skies we have out ahead of that band, but it's still tied to this big spin, so there's a lot of vorticity and a lot of shear, a lot of spin, and a lot of different winds with height. And so that will be the ingredients needed to give you these kind of spin up fast-moving tornadoes that will be moving in a direction that you may not be as accustomed to, right? They might be going south to north or even back east to west, depending on where they are along that band, rotating around our low. A quick look at the latest stats here. We just got a new advisory in from the National Hurricane Center. No significant changes. Movement going now northwest, a little bit faster at 15 miles per hour. We're still right around Monroe, Louisiana with that center point, so we haven't crossed over into Arkansas officially just yet, but we will. And again, sorry, let me update this for you so you can see those timestamps a little bit better. We're calling for 30-mile-per-hour winds over the next day or so, but look what happens Wednesday morning, 35 miles per hour. By Friday, near 40 miles per hour. You don't really associate a storm that goes into Ontario with increasing wind speeds, but thanks to it tangling with another storm that's arriving from a new trough arriving from the west, it's currently providing snow in Montana, a foot of snow in western Montana as of a latest report. That'll actually help to give it some outflow channels and really increase that wind potential as well as that pressure gradient, the difference between the low pressure and the high. All of that said, there's still impacts near the coast too. The onshore flow towards the Big Bend of Florida and the west coast, that water, that higher pressure of water has to leave. You wind up with rip currents. And as I mentioned, that chance for severe weather, including tornadoes, continues this afternoon. So
Cristobal downgraded to a depression as it moves over the Gulf Coast states. But it was packing tropical storm strength winds when it made landfall last night. As reporter Alex Hogan tells us, it brought with it flooding for a New Orleans area already hit hard.
Torrential downpours hit neighborhoods across the southeast as Storm Cristobal moves through. The storm was downgraded to a tropical depression Monday morning after bringing heavy rain and wind to parts of the Gulf Coast. Sections of Louisiana experiencing flooding due to a storm surge of 3 to 5 feet.
A lot of water, but then we even saw water going as far as Jacksonville, Florida. In the low-lying areas that typically get a lot of water did get some.
President Trump issued an emergency declaration for the state. People in New Orleans say they're used to these conditions.
We're a resilient city. Things happen to us and we kind of tend to bounce back, maybe better than some other places.
Definitely don't want anything major like a Katrina or a Category 1 or 2, anything like that. A tropical storm's easy.
Meanwhile, communities in Mississippi seeing several inches of rainfall. Storm surges bringing more water, leading to flooding and dangerous road conditions. And in central Florida, tornadoes and heavy rain displaced dozens of people. At its peak, the storm brought winds of up to 50 miles per hour, but it started to weaken as it moves inland. Forecasters say the storm is expected to weaken in the coming days.
Any area could get some heavy rainfall. It's very efficient.
The National Weather Service says Cristobal will move through the Midwest on Tuesday. In New Orleans, Alex Hogan, 7 News.
And team coverage continues now with meteorologist Vivian Gonzalez, who has more on Cristobal and the steamy local forecast. Viv?
That's right, and the steamy air that's in place is thanks to Cristobal that's moving over Louisiana as we speak, and it's providing for that southerly air, that tropical connection. So it's also been producing some spotty showers and storms across sections of South Florida. Luckily, tomorrow ocean breeze returns, so that's going to change our pattern somewhat. And here's the latest on Cristobal. Yes, it's still a depression moving farther inland around northeast Louisiana, 35-mile-per-hour winds, and it's moving northwest at a faster pace, 15 miles per hour. The official forecast track has it moving through portions of Arkansas as early as tonight, but a lot of rain moving into these areas and more bands setting up shop in the Gulf of Mexico that will continue to impact Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, panhandle of Florida. As it moves through Arkansas tonight, it'll be moving through Missouri and and then eventually Wisconsin by the middle portion of the week into the western Great Lakes region, where it's going to rain itself out. An additional 2 to 4 inches of rain may be possible, so flash flooding will be a concern around the nation's midsection in the next day or two. And severe storms too. There's a likelihood of seeing damaging winds, large hail around these locations. And with the eastern side of the storm, some tornadoes possible through the central Gulf Coast states, and that includes Mississippi and Alabama through tonight.
Cristobal with winds right now at 35 miles an hour. This thing is moving to the north, bringing a lot of heavy rain to communities across parts of Arkansas into Mississippi. You can see all the lightning there with those storms dumping heavy rainfall from, say, Jackson up near Tupelo. Also some thunderstorms bringing heavy rain into parts of Alabama, even western sections of Georgia. Where is this headed? Really extreme western track, very unusual, even unprecedented for a tropical system to work into sections of western and southwestern Wisconsin. But that's what we've got headed our way as we head into the later part of tomorrow.
Cristobal brought heavy rains to parts of the Florida Panhandle. You can see all that rain and all that wind blowing through Miramar Beach on Sunday. In nearby Panama City, wind gusts reached up to 40 miles an hour, and rainfall came down at about just over an inch of rain. But other parts of North Florida saw over a foot of rain. And let's go down to Louisiana and look at the squall as it moved across Grand Isle. This happened yesterday, well after the system made landfall. And again, we saw that heavy rain come through and the wind gusty at times. Sunday, when it made landfall, wind speeds were up around 50 miles an hour. Well, now Tropical Depression Cristobal is up along Interstate 70 in Missouri. Yeah, the system is still cranking. It is still holding together, and it's producing a lot of rainfall as it moves across the Midwest. Its wind speeds up around 30 miles an hour. The pressure about the same as when it made landfall at 992. And again, it is moving at a pretty quick pace at about 25 miles an hour. We are seeing plenty of rain with it, and we're worried about some wind as well. The rainfall is going to continue to really be heavy through parts of Iowa, eventually even up into Wisconsin and across parts of Illinois. We're also seeing this tail end, or the southeast corner of it, bring with it showers and thunderstorms across western Tennessee and into western Kentucky. We're going to watch for that and maybe make its way up into Indianapolis.